What's up?
Alrighty.
It's the
Hello,
Doc Dino
hello.
after show. I'm trying to steal his thunder. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Howdy there, folks. I'm Dino. You probably just saw me on that stream. Sorry, I'm just posting a link to the after show, and we can get started in a second. How's everyone doing tonight or today, wherever you are?
Awesome. Now that I'm in Doc's channel, man, everything's better now.
I was looking for your stream because I got the I got the link in the StreamYard link, and I looked up because it says Doc Dino, and then I got Kent Hovind when I looked up and spelled it right, so that was really annoying.
Yeah, it's a Dr. Dino, like a German, because I
Right.
speak a bit of German. So anyone in the audience who wants to join, feel free to click the link. Everyone is welcome. I guess starting with the go ahead, Grayson here. Starting with the people we have.
Grayson, why did you have to join, man? I was like,
God bless Grayson. I don't know any of you except for Grayson, so I guess starting from the top. Justin, who are you? What's your position?
Doc, you know me.
I don't know. I mean, I don't believe in evolution, but
I'm not fixing my fixing the speaker. Sorry,
but I'm here to listen and learn.
Fair enough. It's always good to learn. Just talking about. Are you still fixing your mic, or are you good to go? Sounds like they're still fixing. Steve, who are you? What do you think? What do you do?
Uh-oh.
Also, it sounds like someone has a rat breathing into the microphone. Just a heads up. I guess Robert Jenkins, who are you?
Oh, Doc, I cannot believe you just said that. Doc, what? What do you mean, who am I? What? But God bless you all, and I'm Robert Jenkins. I'm a individual of Christ, biblical creationist. I mean, just a regular creationist. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a PhD or anything. And yeah, I mean, just here to hang out, I guess, and listen to Nephilim Freed destroy you guys, and yeah. Wait, Doc, are you going to go over like the video? Like, are you going to or nah?
Probably not the whole thing. I usually get people on and play a game or something, just for background.
Oh, for sure.
Gotta close a few tabs.
You asked me who I was.
Doc, how could you not have known the Robert Jenkins?
Sorry, I don't know everyone. My memory bad. I'm sorry.
The guy that told me AI proved his position.
Oh man,
definitely don't remember that.
Hey, Satson, is that how you pronounce your name? I posted a link to a study in the private chat that statistically proves evolution beyond a shadow of any reasonable doubt.
Hey guys, thanks for letting me come in. I got to take a break, grab a little bite to eat something. I'll be back in about 10 minutes. So
sure thing. Happy to have you.
Keep me in. I'd like to talk and appreciate you letting me come in. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Sure.
So, yeah, if I were just going to broadly lay out just the real basic, strongest points of evidence for evolution, that would be the pattern of genetic similarities that we see across species. It would be index fossils, the ordering of index fossils in the fossil record, and then our ability to predict the anatomies of transitional fossils before they're discovered.
You like that anatomy, Grayson? You're talking about the open mic. The anatomy.
Have you ever predicted any?
The anatomy.
Anatomy.
You mean anatomy, right?
Oh, never mind. You know what I meant. I was like,
what were you saying, Satson?
Oh, sorry about that.
Have you ever predicted any supposed anomalies or whatever?
Anatomy.
Can you explain what
you're saying?
Can you explain why that would be necessary or sufficient to support evolution? That I personally make a prediction.
No, I'm just asking the question.
No, I am not a paleontologist. I have not personally made a prediction for transitional anatomies, but you can find them in the literature.
I don't know. It would seem like it would be like you could, for something like that. It would seem like, yeah, you could make a prediction and then go and find it, but I don't see what that proves necessarily.
Huh?
Why? Well, if you can predict something and then you go out and you find what you predicted, does that not lend credence to the model that you use to make the prediction?
I don't know. It's kind of like, I come from a Bible study kind of perspective, I guess, in weighing evidences, and it's kind of like when people, they have an idea and then they go and find it where it agrees with them, but what about everywhere where that doesn't happen?
Right. So you're bringing up some sort of like
Yeah.
confirmation bias or something. But
Right.
like that would have some credibility if it wasn't like the fact that these are fossils in the ground. Like you can't just like say, well, I predicted the anatomy of these fossils and then we went and we found them. Like that's not confirmation bias. Like you're actually finding a real fossil that matched the predicted anatomy.
Well,
It's like
I
it's like
mean,
with a standard model of particle physics. They predicted that the Higgs boson should exist. Then they built a large enough particle accelerator, and then they found what they predicted.
okay, so give me the best example of a prediction that happened. And
I would just direct you to the video I made that's compiling like over a dozen examples. But like the very first one, the one that was like famously put evolution like pretty much as the consensus in the field, was Charles Darwin made the prediction for what kind of a transitional anatomy should be found for like transitions between non-avian dinosaurs and birds. And then they found it. It's called Archaeopteryx. They found it just 2 years after he made
Oh
that
my
prediction.
gosh.
Well, it was predicted, and then we found it.
Do you want to share something, Robert? It seems like Archaeopteryx made you have an eye roll.
I don't know. I've heard about all that the purported evidence for Archaeopteryx being purportedly evidence for evolution. I've heard about that.
And do you have thoughts on that? You think that's not the case?
Just a little skeptical. That's all. Oh no, continue, Grayson. I shouldn't have interrupted you. I'm sorry. That was rude.
No worries. I mean, you were just exclaiming your skepticism, but I want to make sure that your skepticism is well founded, or at least based on something that's not just feelings.
Oh, okay. I understand.
Like I understand that there's like a certain amount of incredulity that creationists will sometimes have, but like those are feelings. I gotta make sure that they are supported by actual facts or reason.
Yeah, I was asking you
Gotcha.
that. Thanks for
Hey,
thanks for
FFC, by
telling
the
me,
way, God bless you.
Grayson. I was asking you that earlier in the chat. I was trying to figure out like how many Tiktaalik like situations were there where they predicted and then they found something.
In the
so
original expedition, they found 3 Tiktaalik specimens. I'm not sure how many have been discovered since that initial discovery, but the initial discovery was not just one individual.
No, not just
Can
one
you
Tiktaalik, but
explain
like
though what did
anything, right?
what did they predict? Because this is very vague already, like what you're saying. Because you could say, oh, they predicted that there would be
make a
bones or
prediction.
something.
Sure,
And
so
I don't know anything what you're saying because I don't.
pardon me, not to pull a Kent, but let's go one at a time. So,
Yeah.
Someone asked, how was Tiktaalik predicted? Should we tackle that first?
Well, he said what was predicted about Tiktaalik's anatomy.
Right.
Oh, okay. So Tiktaalik's anatomy. So first, we predicted Tiktaalik's anatomy because of existing fossils that we knew of. Stuff like Acanthostega and Ichthyostega, animals like that. We knew roughly when those were from, at least in the geologic record and the conventional paradigm, and using what we knew, we were able to predict what layer of rock from what time this animal should be found in. And people kind of went from there. Neil Shubin and colleagues.
And they also, they predicted where they needed to go to find such a fossil that had never been found before. I mean, that's pretty compelling.
I don't see what's compelling about that, but
how?
Well, you can predict a lot of things, but it doesn't even mean your predictions are right, nor
Well, it does. If I say I predict that you should find this fossil species at this spot in Ellesmere Island,
but how do you know
Canada,
your
and
logic
it had
and
never been
reasoning
found
is
before.
correct even in coming to that prediction?
Sorry, what? Can you repeat that? You kind of started asking that in the middle of my sentence.
Yeah, sorry. How do you know that your logic and reasoning for that prediction is correct?
So you're using the model to generate a hypothesis, right? And then you're going to go test if that hypothesis is true or not. This is the fundamentals of the scientific method, right? So you're using the model to generate that prediction, right? You're saying, well, how do you know that that prediction that you're generating logically follows from that model, right? That's what you're asking. Like, you can't just say like, oh, well, I'm going to use evolution to predict the Higgs boson. Like, that doesn't make sense. It would never pass through peer review because other experts would see that and say, hey, this is nonsensical. Your prediction does not follow from your premises.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
I guess I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just don't.
Like, this is the fundamental method of science.
I'm extremely skeptical about pretty much everything. So
that's fine.
I
I like skepticism. I think that you should be skeptical about everything, but like, I think that you should also follow that skepticism in seeking out the actual evidence of what is supported by that evidence. And I think it's pretty overwhelming what that evidence supports.
Grayson, so I was trying to ask you, like, not how many tiktaalics they found. I apologize for the confusion. I was trying to find out how many different species all throughout the world like a tiktaalik. So how many times somebody said, "Hey, I could find something like this over there," and then they went and then they found it.
Okay. So Australopithecus is an example.
Yeah.
Amphicynins, hemicynins.
Okay.
Maybe make it easier. Can you pick a group of animals, and we can go from there?
Like, I could probably list over 30 different exampls.
No, you don't have to list them, like all the different ones. Just quantifiably, you think there's 50. It happened like 50 times. You think over in the lottery, it's like 60 times.
Oh, I don't know. Collectively, over the history of paleontology, it's happened thousands of times. This happens with dinosaurs. It happens with mammals.
This is okay. So
of animals.
So this tiktaalik-like situation has happened thousands of times, where somebody's made a prediction and then they went out and then they had a dig and they found that exact thing. Not exact, but like, let's say with plus or minus like 20%, right? Like, you know,
it's happened a lot.
Yeah.
It's just that not every case makes the news.
Okay, no, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, how many times roughly, and then how many grad students all across the world are making predictions that don't come true versus the ones that are actually coming true using the similar methodologies.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to grasp at. I'd like to see what the accuracy and specificity of this model would be.
There's no way of determining that, and that's the problem.
Well, I would be interested in even just one example of a prediction made using evolution, like for a fossil of transitional anatomy that was not found. I'm sure that they're out there, but I just would like to actually know of one. Does anyone have one?
Yeah.
Well, it would be self-evident that even if you took a prediction that could have been right and could have actually happened the way they predicted it, that maybe they didn't even find what they were looking for because the bones just were destroyed or something. It's You see what I'm saying, though? It's just
Yeah. I understand the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but like you can have contradictory evidence that is found that then can rule out that initial prediction. So there are ways that you could have falsified predictions of evolution, but I'm just not aware of any. That's why I'm asking if anybody knows of any falsified predictions for transitional anatomies that have been predicted that were then falsified. I would be interested in those examples.
just what
Uh,
I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I
It's
mean,
very
I
hard
know
to
there's been a
falsify.
few. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. Like with dinosaur stuff, sometimes we predicted a certain transitional, but it turned out to be something else. It does happen. It's just fairly rare because we've gotten pretty good at guessing.
Yeah, but how good are we at guessing? Like, are we, compared to all the guesses that we're doing, like, are we only right 0.01% of the time? That's why I'm saying, like, can we quantify this? Because it seems great, okay, yeah, we have this prediction, we got it, sure.
I
But
don't
in the
think I
grand
can
scheme
give
of
you a
things,
number.
like you can type out, you could throw a dart a million times, and we got to see how, accuracy and specificity, right? Is the way we're throwing the dart leading to an actual bullseye at a relevant percentage, a relevant amount of the time, or is it that we're just triumphing
Well, that's why
the certain
given
times that it is?
that
So even
you
just
can't
in the
actually
example
know.
of Tiktaalik, okay, the statistical likelihood of them actually finding that is so small if it was just a random guess that they were just throwing out a dart on the wall because they predicted a certain island in Canada where they should find a certain fossil
Sure.
anatomy. That
No,
like
no, sure,
even
absolutely.
just that one example, the statistical likelihood of that happening just by chance and evolution not being true is astronomically small.
To be fair,
Well,
every there's a Powerball winner, almost every single time, right? Every single year. So what are the chances of having a Powerball winner every single year? We're talking about
That's
events. We're
not
talking about
not
compar-
an
that's
no,
not
element.
I know it's a
comparable
very
because you
simple.
can
It's
make
very
it.
simple,
No,
guys.
that's not
Guys, please
comparable because you can
don't
have
jump at the gun.
infinite amount of
I'm just
Powerball.
talking about probabilities, right? I'm just saying, yeah, we have these discoveries. Somebody did make this prediction, and then they did find it. But what is the actual probability of somebody making that prediction and finding it? Is it greater than what it actually is? Are we putting emphasis too much in this and saying, oh, because of these discoveries, we're actually accurate? But in reality, there's thousands of grad students who, or PhD students who are completely missing the ball using the same methodologies. You know what I mean? We're
I hate
talking
to
about,
say, but
how big is this
I don't
chance?
actually see where the like you can make like you were saying how something I don't know how you worded it, but you're saying how if something's not related, then it's not going to pass the test. Well, I don't see what's related in making a prediction of where you're going to find a certain bone or something is related to evidence that that bone was somehow
Sure, let me
previously
explain.
something
Sure,
else.
especially if it's an educated
let me-
prediction too. If you
let me
have a
just-
lot of information and you're a very well studied individual and you have
Okay.
experience and knowledge, you'll probably also increase the likelihood of your prediction. So it's not like you're just
Right.
like Houdini. You're making
Okay,
an
let me just-
educated guess.
Let me just
Here,
explain it
let's
real
let
quick.
Grayson answer, and then we'll let someone else have a turn. Right?
Also, Doc, are those Therizinosaurus? I love them.
Therizinosaurids, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So anyways, in this particular, okay, sorry. I got totally derailed with just talking about, can you restate your question? I'm sorry. Like the other guy.
Okay.
I don't see how it's related.
All right.
Like,
I'm
right.
sorry.
Okay, right. The relatedness. It's genetic similarities between two different groups, right? So there's a group called tetrapods, right? Weird tetrapods, like birds are tetrapods, salamanders are tetrapods. These are all examples of tetrapods. All tetrapods, all of us, from humans to birds to salamanders, are all the most genetically similar to lobe-finned fishes out of all the other fishes. So these are adjacent groups, all tetrapods and lobe-finned fishes. So the prediction is that there should be a fossil with intermediate anatomy between these two related groups. What makes them related is their genetic similarities between the two groups. And then they were able to predict the location because in the fossil record, you can see an evolutionary history, and they knew that, well, if there was going to be such a last common ancestor between tetrapods today and lobe-finned fishes, it should exist sometime in the late Devonian period. So they knew which rocks were of late Devonian period, and they knew that in this island in northern Canada, the late Devonian period is very near the surface. So that's why they went specifically to that island in Canada and had that specific prediction for what they should find there.
No, that's great. That's a very good explanation of what they did. But how many times has somebody applied a similar methodology on a different dig site and been wrong?
I am not aware of a single instance of that happening. I'm sure it has happened.
Maybe I'm a fool.
I would like
but
somebody to
I
provide
just don't-
one example so I could actually
Yeah.
just learn of one.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, we probably don't know on the back end that there's all these people doing research, but they're actually failing to find anything, and we don't hear about it because it's not sexy enough to be published.
Yeah,
That happens a lot with a lot of sciences.
Right,
It's just how
right,
it goes.
exactly. So this discovery
let me-
that one would triumph
let-
as to be
Let me
the
say something, okay?
yeah,
We
go for it.
don't- So we don't know all the failures and we don't know all the successes, but a lot of the predictions that have been made, very precise predictions, have come true. And it's very consistent. Like, it consistently happens. If it didn't work, if it didn't give results, we wouldn't be using it.
Okay.
I just
Yeah,
I don't know,
I'm gonna
it
give somebody
seems
else a chance. I don't want to.
Yeah, I know I mean, you can make predictions. That's like, that's okay and all, but it's like, how do we know that it directly?
I just don't like. I don't see how this proves to me that dinosaurs and birds are related or whatever. I just
Hmm?
I don't know.
Okay,
Oh,
so you
we can
understand the
talk
basic
about that if
logic
you want.
where you could understand the basic logic where we're saying if dinosaurs and birds are related and have a common ancestor, if then, it's an if then statement. If that is the case, then we should expect to find fossils with a certain transitional anatomy. So then we go and we look and we find those predicted fossils. Thus, that is evidence supporting that initial prediction, that initial hypothesis, that initial model that generated that hypothesis. That's how all branches of
Right.
science work.
Those
But
fossils.
in order to do a
Your hypothesis
meta-analysis
is
and to
right.
prove whether or not
No,
this is
One person
repeatable,
at a time, folks.
right?
One person at a
So,
time.
right. So, a meta-analysis to prove that this is a repeatable methodology would be having to look at all the research and all the attempts that were made using the methodology, and to look at the success rates and failure rates, and then we can actually make
This
an
is why I
accurate
don't like this kind
calculation.
of evidence, because you can't determine that. You don't know every science
Of
experiment
course,
that's ever happened.
not every, but you can definitely go on a university level, and you can get this information from the
Yeah, but you're gonna
on a
need a
departmental
sample
level.
that's
Absolutely.
So if I
much
may, I
larger
don't
than
know if a
that,
study like
and
that has been done, but I would be interested to see the results.
Not
Right,
only that,
exactly.
not only
Because
that,
then
but
we can
some-
verify
some-
whether or not our methodology is correct, because this is all about making sure that we are using the right tools to make the right logical assumptions.
Yeah, but every different test would have to have a different weight to it because of how valid the hypothesis would seem to be. It's just so much. It becomes so much of a theory and theoretical that I don't think that's possible to.
I don't think that it's necessary in order to test the validity of evolution. Like, even if we just throw out every successful prediction ever made, and we just say that there's a million more failed predictions, it doesn't change the weight of the evidence from genetics or index fossils, etc.
But that's
There
dangerous
is
to
no
think that
living.
way.
Hey
It
guys,
would be dangerous to say that it doesn't really matter as much because we would need that information, especially because it correlates to other fields such as the medical field, where sometimes such information would lead to life-saving procedures or alterations that we could provide that we haven't been able to before.
Yeah, and evolution is used successfully in the medical field to make breakthroughs.
no, sir, it's never been used. I'm
Would
trying
you
to
like a
share
source
something.
showing
I'm
its use?
sharing something. So doctors don't have any need to know or believe about how a thing came into being in order to treat patients. They don't. They treat patients based on what's going on with what they have. Not has nothing to do with theory about where it came from.
Oh, wait, did I ever claim that they did? I don't think I did.
So what you're talking about is immunity, but that doesn't.
No, I'm not
provide
talking about
evidence.
immunity either. Do you want to ask me what I was talking about, Neff?
No, I'd rather just tell you what I was trying
You want
to
to just
say.
tell me what I was talking about?
I'm sharing on the screen a picture from an
Here,
article
let's.
that I wrote
that
helps
how
you
about
better
this,
understand
Neff?
the. Oh, here it
Neff,
goes again.
Hey,
let's
Doc,
let
Doc,
Grayson
I have,
explain what he was saying, and then you can go off on the fish. Okay,
Doc,
Grayson.
before you get started, just quick question: are you gonna have like allocated time where we can like ask, or is everyone just like jumping in whenever? Because I have a couple questions and I want
We
to
can
know.
go more towards allocated time. So Grayson, Neff, you. All right.
Okay,
Let's go.
Got
I'll
it.
just explain the specific example I was thinking of when I made the statement about evolution being used in the medical field. Because evolution has been used to generate new medicines, new drugs. They've literally induced mutations across a bunch of different organisms and like let it evolve like with natural selection in their actual, like, I guess it would be artificial because they're constructing the environment in order to get better efficiency drugs. We've used evolution to generate new medicines. That was the example I was going for.
All right. And then Neff, want to talk about the fish? If you're talking, I can't hear you.
It seems like
Okay, so I would say what he's talking about is not evolution, but what I'm showing on the screen is an image from an extensive article I've written about the fish subject. So what I want you to pay attention to is the number of roofing and snout bones in these creatures that are allegedly examples from various clades that produced phylogeny here. So we see we have fewer bones, then fewer, then all of a sudden many more, then many fewer, then more again. So the evolutionist has to believe, and if we used examples from either left and right on this, it happens repeatedly over and over. Now here's the interesting thing. Notice that the roofing and snout bones are nicely shaped in such a way that they're not only symmetrical, but they fit like a piece of a puzzle into the skull of that creature, and their shape conforms to the other ones around them. They have to, so that they can fit into the skull, right? What you're trying to tell us is that evolution produces a brand new piece of bone in the skull of a creature, and natural selection retains it when it doesn't fit the shape of the skull. The idea that mutation is going to create a nicely fitting symmetrical bone that fits into the skull of the creature by chance is an absurd idea. It's not going to happen.
So
that's why
let me
evolutionists
address.
don't believe. So that's why evolutionists don't believe it happens the way you think it does.
Neff, you've
Okay.
made your point.
No, I
So
didn't.
what I'm pretty sure you made your point.
I didn't.
Now what I'm seeing here is a series of different fish. What is the, I'll just ask, conventional time scale from all the way on the left to all the way on the right? Can you give me a millions of years estimate?
4.5 million is what evolutionists have been saying for decades.
4.5 million from Houston Erpaton to Ichthyostega?
Roughly. It depends on which one you start with, but 4.5 is a window. You know, evolutionists never agree 100% about the time. They've been saying 250,000 years is the amount of time it took for modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, to come from hominids, and others are saying 1.5 million years. So it's a rough number.
So I'll just say, if it is 4.5 million years,
it's 20
going
million.
by that, is it 20 million?
Well,
at least between Eusthenopteron and Ichthyostega, there's a difference of 20 million years between those two species. And again, this is not a This little
Okay.
evolutionary path is not a real thing between these. But
Okay, 20. If you want to go with
Okay.
20 instead of
So-
what,
Wait a minute.
that's fine.
Regardless, so Neff, what we were looking at here, from what I know of these fish, they are members of a group of fish called Sarcopterygians. It's a very wide and diverse group even today. It's basically just lobe-finned fish. These are representatives of some of the Sarcopterygians that we
That's
know
right.
of from different times. They're
Yes,
not
of course.
necessarily each other's direct ancestors. We don't know if there is a direct line of descent. So, them having variation in the bones of the snout and of the head isn't a problem, especially
What?
when the bones that are there are alterations of existing bone. Now, previously, you mentioned that the bones are symmetrical and that they fit all together. Well, reason one, the earliest animal, most of the earliest animals we have are bilaterians. They are symmetrical. That appeared, as far as we know, very early on in the evolution of most animals. So that's not a big surprise. And if the bones didn't fit together, if they weren't good for the fish would die and that wouldn't get passed on. They are a symmetrical, well put together design is heavily selected for, especially when you're a predator. Okay?
So,
Like,
so you
we can
just gave
account
me a
for all of this.
So you just gave me a Jusso story. You can't account for any of it. And if you had paid attention, you're not really listening. When I first started speaking, I said these are examples from clades that one evolutionists believe one is an antecedent of the other. I didn't say they are a direct lineage, so you misrepresented what I said. We don't need to have the exact example, say this particular species within that clade is the exact one. These are the examples from those clades that evolutionists line up zoologically and say this is the ancestry, okay, is these clades.
So,
right? Okay,
so
the
Neff,
problem
what you
remains,
just
sir.
did
Wait,
was
now,
saying I
wait.
misrepresented you, and then you repeated most of what I
did.
said.
No, you did misrepresent. I didn't say. You tried to explain to me that these are examples within clades. I had already stated that.
Yes.
Okay, that's the first thing I said. Okay, so it doesn't matter though. The point is still this: the bones morphologically fit within the skull. Okay, random mutation is not going to, if you believe random mutation is going to pop two symmetrical bones into the skull of the creature and they're going to fit in there, and all the shape of the whole skull is going to change. The others have to change their shape to accommodate the new ones, right? And they have to be symmetrical.
So,
If you
before you
believe,
go to something else, can I
finish
address
my
that?
sentence? No, sir. I'm not interrupting
Neff,
you.
you're making a bunch
I'm
of
not
different
interrupting
points.
you. You're
Let me
interrupting me. You're doing what
let me
evolutionists
address the
always
one.
do and refuse to allow somebody to speak on the mic for more than 11 seconds without interrupting them. Right?
Well, Neff,
Because
when you
don't
go to
like.
5 different
No,
topics, it's
so
hard to
I'm
address
sorry.
them all.
I'm one topic, and you won't stop interrupting because you're afraid to hear arguments. Stop
I
it.
don't feel any
I
fear.
don't
I'm not
understand
might
how
be.
this
He
is
might
an
have like
argument
a
for anything
conclusion,
because
I'm not
the,
interrupting you.
No, guys,
So
I
allow
think
me to make
Neff,
the point.
I think
get
he's getting a
halfway
When you
through
take
the
position.
10
point.
minutes to make your point, you
I
should
get
be
halfway
interrupted.
through the point, and you start interrupting because you
Well,
don't
hurry
want
up.
me to
Get
make
your
the
point
point.
across.
Okay, don't be
Okay.
afraid.
Get
Don't
your
be
point
Okay,
afraid.
Neff, you
across.
have 30 seconds.
Don't be afraid. Okay.
Nephilim for you have 30 seconds. Okay,
Okay.
go.
So, as I said, the idea that random mutation is going to create a new bones ex nihilo, even if it's smaller than what it would eventually become, and make it fit symmetrically into the skull, which would require all the other bones to change their shape so to accommodate the new ones. To believe that story is fantasy. We don't know of such processes occurring in humans or any other species. Nobody's observed any examples of this. And it's just a fantasy of the grandest kind. It's an absurdity. It's not going to happen. If a bone popped into existence like you think, natural selection would say, wow, you're an anomaly. This is
Okay.
bizarre. You're
Neff,
screwing up the shape of my skull.
Neff,
And natural
time.
selection
Can I
would
ask
actually
something?
remove
The study that I
Okay.
just posted in the private chat directly debunks everything that Nephilim Free just said.
And to address that, just what you just said, Neff, it is not ex nihilo. The bones in the skull are modifications of existing bones. All of everything you just showed is a modification of a pre-existing structure. That happens between generations today in
I
many
just
groups.
posted a study of the actual morphological variation all in human skulls in archaeological populations that have different sagittal sutures, meaning like different patterns of bone fusion in the formation of the skull. This is just within humans. They have different numbers, different patterns of this, and it all came about through genetics. We have the mechanism, we have the evidence. Everything Neff said was false.
Okay.
I don't
And
understand.
we just went through Neff's example. I forget who someone else wanted to talk next. And really quick, I know there are people in the back. We're going to wait a minute before letting you in just because we already have a bunch of people. So sorry for the wait.
Doc,
Who
look,
wanted to go next?
it was me, but look at my comment in the side chat and see if you think we should talk about it now or later.
See, what I don't understand is that
Sorry, which comment?
why is he making specific arguments when I feel like
In the private chat, I put
the problem I have with evolution is just the whole chain. Like, how do you? It just seems bizarre to me that everything could have came about through random mutations, but yet I just like I don't understand why we argue about whether the fish has or can develop, a bone or something in its skull.
Do you
What
recognize?
about
Sure.
everything else?
Do you recognize that
here,
all you just expressed was
um,
your own feelings of incredulity?
Well, no, that's
Well,
fair,
guys,
and we can go.
Well, I'm
We
just
can go
using
over
the word
that.
feel.
I
But
think
what I'm saying is that there needs to be a much what I notice on Donnie's channel often is you guys end up arguing about like minute details and you don't take a step back and look at the whole picture. And what someone's got to convince someone of evolution, you're going to have to show them the whole picture. No one's going to be convinced of one thing or the other by just looking at, oh, well, I debunked you on how this skull forms in someone's head in the fish's
Okay.
head or something. You see what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, I understand. And to be fair, we were just going over Neff's example. I think that is worth talking about. Josh, though, has been waiting for a while to talk about something. How about we tackle his thing and then we go to you? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay. So, Josh, you have questions dealing with resource availability?
Yes.
That sounds interesting.
I'll just kind of phrase it like this. So, see, in the biblical creation story, we have everything is created, the light, the sun, the moon, the vegetation, and then come the animals, and then man, and then God rests. So in this creation model, like God didn't create man first, and then they had no vegetation to eat, right? So the vegetation was strategically created before the animals which were going to use this vegetation as their substance. So in the creation model, there's no issue with resource availability. The food would be there before the animals got there. Now, my question is, in the evolution model, how do you explain resource availability? Like, is there multiple prokaryotes or eukaryotes or single cell organisms scattered throughout the world, evolving at the same time? That because these would need organic matter to kind of grow unless they're using like photosynthesis. And then at what point do they transition from photosynthesis to like actually having to eat something, right? So I just
Okay. So,
kind of see who wants to tackle that.
sure. Grayson, how about you go ahead?
Yeah, I'd like to. Okay, so are you familiar with the term like chemiosynthesis? It's like photosynthesis, but it's like using your metabolism from chemicals.
I'm not, but go ahead.
Okay, so there are organisms today on the planet that are some of the most basal when we actually look at their genetics. That means like they're at the base of the evolutionary tree when we construct these trees using genetics. And these are chemiosynthetic organisms, meaning that they break down naturally occurring chemicals like a lot of like sulfur compounds or methane or things that naturally occur at hydrothermal vents. There are organisms that will break these down for their metabolism. So this is a very simple resource that would be available before there was any other life.
Yeah, but we're talking about specific organisms that use chemicals as their source of nutrients, right? I'm breaking sulfur to feed to grow, right? And the energy input in order to multiply, right? So at one point or another, the first animal appeared, be it a lizard or whatever type of animal that is. Like, what is that animal eating? Right? Because
So you understand that.
Yeah, what are the metabolic components necessary to make that evolutionary jump, so to speak?
Wait, hold on. One question at a time, really quick.
No, I thought I was clarifying what he was saying. Sorry.
Okay, so like you have these chemiosynthetic organisms. Then you have the development of photosynthesis, where instead of using chemicals as their resource for metabolism, you have the ability to use light from the sun. So then there are two kinds of organisms, right? But there's predation that can occur among single cells. Single cells can eat each other. So now you have a food chain. You have like a food web, a pyramid, right? You have like some single cells that eat other single cells, some single cells that eat chemicals, some that eat light. You have an entire food web at that point. So you already have organisms eating each other before there's even multicellularity.
this will be just kind of my last clarifying point here, and then we can kind of move on. Sorry about my dog. The squeak toys, man.
No problem.
So what I'm saying is, like, in comparison to the creation model, at the time when there was a bird created, there would have been seeds or some kind of vegetation or some kind of fish for them to eat, right? So how does the timing work out in the evolution model? Because what you want me to believe is that at the time the first omnivore, those are the ones that eat plant, right? At the time that first animal appeared that eats plants, it just so happens that the plants also evolved at the same timeline to be available. So I just don't see the timing, how you can kind of map that out. In the creation model, it's mapped out day after day, but in the evolution model, some of these things are millions of years apart.
Yeah,
so
it's not a just so story. There's not like a just so. These things evolve to fulfill ecological niches. So like if the niche is not there already in the environment, then nothing is going to evolve to occupy a niche that doesn't exist. So like nothing is going to evolve for a role in which there's no food for it to eat. That doesn't make sense. So like obviously, if you have a bunch of photosynthesizing plankton, then there's no predators for it. There's nothing to eat it. Then obviously there's an empty role that could be filled by whatever is the first thing that evolves the ability to eat that plankton.
Now wait a minute.
And
you just said,
How do you fulfill a new role if you haven't evolved the features yet necessary to be in that role?
You
And you just die out.
Features.
No, you see, if the new scenario that you'd be facing is one that is existentially threatening, you wouldn't just be able to, in the moment or within a generation or two, evolve the necessary traits to now adapt to that new threatening environment. You would die out, or you would be injured at least to the point of not being able to procreate. So, because that's what we see whenever you change the environment to a toxic one with current animals. They die out. They don't procreate. They're very stressed. They become runts. Maybe they devolve, or they mutate or something.
May I answer your question?
Yeah, please. But go ahead. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. So first, I'll say that in general, the pattern we see with evolution is that organisms generally start out more generalized, more basic, before becoming more specialized in something. So let's say you have a generalized omnivore, a single cell. It just eats whatever organic matter comes near it. That's all it does. It can be plant, animal, other cells, whatever. Sometimes, in different circumstances, you'll get populations that are isolated. And these isolated populations can accumulate these tendencies towards one food source or the other. This can happen quickly or over a long time. We see this happen in most groups of animals. So you don't just have a herbivore suddenly become a carnivore. But sometimes you have an herbivore that starts eating a little bit of meat, and maybe a little bit more meat, and a little bit more. Over generations, they become better at absorbing nutrients from meat, and they become carnivores. Okay? It's not a
Sure.
sudden dietary switch.
I hear you on that.
It's gradual.
But why is it that now? Okay, why is it that they were eating a little bit of meat if they didn't eat meat before, and they didn't have meat in their environment until there was a sudden shift in their environment where the previous food resource was now scarce, and there was a new one that they had to adapt to versus not having to adapt to before.
So we've seen examples of this multiple times, like nylon eating bacteria, right?
No, right,
Like,
yeah, sure.
We've seen organisms evolve like new, like actual biomolecular pathways to eat things that they could not eat previously, like nylon, or there's the example in Lenski's experiment of eating citrate in the presence of oxygen. Like, we have actually watched in both labs and in nature the exact process you're talking about.
Sure, but in those two scenarios, weren't those synthetic pressures created in the lab as variables to test? Wasn't the pressure necessary to create that genetic leap created rather than?
I could be wrong, but I think nylonase was natural. Like that happened.
Nylonase
in the
was not
wild.
in the lab.
I remember you talked about nylonase on a video before. I just don't remember 100%. That's why I was wondering if it was that the lab testing was synthetic, applied to synthetic pressure or not. So
Lenski's experiments were with synthetic selective pressures, but in the case of nylonase, that was a bacteria which previously could not consume nylon, but which was they sampled it near the wastewater of a nylon factory. So there was like abundant amounts of nylon, but nothing in the environment was able to eat it. But there's a lot of it around there. So obviously, the first organism that can kind of eat nylon, but maybe not efficiently, is going to be at an advantage because it has access to a whole other food resource that nothing else can eat.
So it had a little bit of an ability already, and it was a whole population that just kept this ability even if it wasn't necessary. But then when it finally became randomly necessary, then it sprung into action, and that's when it became a much more functional
I would
thing.
push
Is that what you're
back
saying?
on your characterization there. It's like there are like the actual proteins that are used to break down nylon are somewhat similar to other proteins that can be used to break down other materials. They just are just very bad at breaking down nylon, but there are mutations that occur that make them better at breaking down nylon.
Okay. So they already did it, but they got better at it.
Yeah, it's not like they just had a useless protein floating around in their genome that wasn't doing anything before, and then all of a sudden nylon was created by humans, and they were like, "Oh, hey, this is perfect."
Right. No, I mean, exactly. It was there before. They probably weren't using it because there wasn't enough nylon in their environment. But then, hey, suddenly once there was enough nylon, bam! Now it's like at max capacity.
Well,
that's what
wasn't necessary.
I'll let the chime in after this.
It wasn't necessarily that they had the ability to produce, or it's not necessarily that they had the ability to digest some nylon before. Nylon is, correct me if I'm wrong, Grayson, a polymer, like a complex chemical. If they have some ability to break down complex chemicals, like I don't know, say cellulose, which is pretty common in the environment and a lot of organisms break down for energy, then they might be able to apply that ability to new, more common polymers in the environment. Is that what happened with nylonase, Grayson? Do you know? Or am I off
It's
base?
a little bit different because it depends. It's like more of like the types of bonds that those proteins are breaking rather than them being specifically like polymers or not. But yeah, but basically,
yeah, it was a what's the term? It's an pre-existing function that was adopted for a new use.
The real problem here is that
Right, from naturally
ability of the
selected, you say?
bacteria to the real problem here is that what you're hearing is a storytelling. It's not evidence of evolution. This is not even evolutionary change. The ability of the bacteria to break down nylon doesn't change the structural design of the bacteria one iota. It has nothing to do with its anatomy at all.
it changes the structural design.
Can I
of
see?
proteins.
Interrupted already. Interrupted already.
I thought you were done now.
Already interrupted already.
Neff,
About
finish. You have
6
30 seconds.
6
You have 30 seconds again.
I got 6 seconds. Okay. So it doesn't change the structural design of the bacteria now, right? So it can't be considered evolutionary change because evolution, of course, posits that anatomy changes over time incrementally, right? So unless you're pointing to evidence that anatomy changes incrementally over time in species, you're not pointing to evolutionary change. Biological adaptations, the ability to break down something with a novel enzyme that's part of a gene expression change, has no effect on the structural design of the bacteria at all.
So
that's what evolution requires. So it's not.
That's time.
Change.
So I wanted to also address one more thing here. Somebody said something about.
Wait. Can I just say one sentence in response to that?
Go ahead.
Changes in the structure of enzymes are still evolutionary changes.
No, that's biochemistry. That's not.
Also,
that's not anatomy.
I want to just say to Neff, evolution isn't just the change in body structures. Evolution can be behavioral, anatomical, or the way you metabolize different foods.
Yeah, maybe you guys want to define. Maybe you guys want to define the term evolution, so you're all on the same page. Just both of you put out your evolution term, right?
What they're trying to do.
That doesn't prove molecules to man.
What they're trying to do is tell you that any kind of biochemical change an organism experiences is evidence that creatures became a fundamentally different kind of animal over time. See the storytelling in there? No, I'm sorry. That's not evidence. That's a fail. Try something that supports the theory. Okay.
So here's something I wanted to expand on because somebody mentioned something about like it just so happens that by the time there was an herbivore, there was some kind of herb for them to eat. So let's just grant you that somehow perfectly timed out perfectly over millions of years. Let's grant you that.
That's not what we're saying at all.
It didn't time out perfectly. Plants existed for a long time, as far as we know, before there was any herbivore.
It just so happens that eventually an herbivore found this as an extra resource. But here's my question.
They exploited something in the environment to improve their means of reproduction.
You keep loading your statements with like, "Oh, it just so happened," and it just is so crazy. Like,
okay, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to downplay evolution. We have genuine questions. So, and maybe this is a new term here, but is there some kind of macro evolutionary consciousness in which these particular evolutionary patterns that are happening are in expectation of a future type of resource demand?
No.
Or is it a micro evolutionary consciousness where they're only concerned with their own evolution?
There's no consciousness.
Well,
there's got to be some kind of consciousness going on.
No, there doesn't.
They have to show structural design change that causes us to believe.
I think I understand what he's
organism is related to another.
Hold on. Somebody says they understand what I'm getting at.
Biochemical changes don't do that.
Are you trying to say perhaps that on a macro scale between all different kinds of creatures there is some sort of shareability between them? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, something about that. Like, let's
Okay,
just, yeah, go ahead.
that's scientifically accurate. Continue.
That's it. I'm just wondering how
Oh,
that plays out, because you know,
yeah,
when you
because
start adding a consciousness to something, it's a whole different level of evolution. Now we have evolutionary consciousness, which is
yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
true. That is a thing, but
let,
it's not
let us
necessarily
ex-
called evolutionary consciousness. There's another term, and it's not necessarily perfectly defined right now. But what is going on, and what we're noticing here, is that with certain species, let's say, actually, last week I was reading an article about this, a species of Arabica coffee, right? And so they found that some of these plants, the isolated groups, actually ended up sharing some sort of genomic data, even though they weren't interlinked at all, geographically or physically. They still ended up sharing some sort of genomic data. So it leads to us talking about the fact that our genome itself, all this DNA, this data that we quote unquote still don't know about and used to call junk, actually has some sort of, as you say, um, conscious function where genes are getting shifted around, so to speak. And
so
it's very cool.
okay. Grayson, do you want to go after that, or do you want me to?
that's all I have for
There's
this
no
topic. So if you
consciousness
guys want to
involved
kind
at
of,
any point in this. There doesn't need to be. It's not necessary. Like, you have natural selection. That's not a conscious process.
Yes. First, like Grayson said, there is no consciousness behind evolution. Evolution is a complex process, but it basically boils down to random mutation, well, sub-random mutation, followed by selective pressures in the environment. It's a bit more complicated, but that's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah, and I think the
No,
creationist
let me
side is
finish.
arguing against the mutation aspect. I think it's the mutation part of the whole evolution concept that seems to
Well,
be the major point of conflict. I think from
we see
one side
mutations
says,
happen.
well, right. So one side says that an infinitesimal series of minute mutations is going to lead to some sort of greater functional metabolic change and or systemic change in these animals and these organisms. But whereas the other side is saying, no, these mutations aren't necessarily the building blocks, but they're rather a defective mechanism, and that there are other features, for example, pre-existing genes selected during natural events or epigenetic factors, for example, that would end up causing variations in births over generations. So I think the only key difference here in the debate would be whether or not it is a mutation, a mutation buildup, or something else that is the main factor behind what we see today.
What you have to understand is that what the evolutionists cite when they ask for examples of evolution, they point to things like bacteria gaining immunity, nylon A's. But here's the question: how many of this kind of change can occur in an organism that will change its structural design so that you can say, look, it's evolving to become a fundamentally different type of organism? The answer is none. No number.
Cleminimotis.
Not 100 billion, not 1,000 trillion. Google will ever change the structural design of the organism.
Cleminimotis is a clear
These kinds of
example of
things
that.
are. So you're already interrupting.
I thought you were done,
I
man.
haven't been.
Well,
No,
you
you
didn't
didn't
get
think I
your
was done.
point, Neff.
You didn't think I
You
was done.
can't
I've been
keep
on the
com-
mic for
Okay.
8 seconds. You got 8 seconds that time. Okay.
Well,
Don't
normally
be so
when
scared.
people talk,
Mouth
they
Grayson,
make a
and then
point
you
don't be
and then
so
keep
stop
scared,
talking.
talking.
Grayson.
Let us address the
Don't be
point.
so scared, Grayson. Don't be so
Because
scared.
We're not
normally
scared.
when
You're
one
No,
just
person
talking.
speaks to
oh,
each other,
you're
they make
failing right
one
now.
point
You're
and then
failing. I've
stop
been on the
talking.
mic for 8
Oh,
seconds and you jump in.
um,
We're not talking.
can I
8 seconds.
interrupt with something on a
So
more positive note?
can somebody speak without the evolutionists ganging up on them after 8 seconds? Are you guys that scared? So allow me to finish make my point. Okay, so no number of these kinds of changes. If we ask the evolutionists how these kind of biochemical changes accrue to become anatomical changes, so we can say the creature is morphing structurally into a different kind of organism, the answer is none. They won't cite any. The point is, citing things like nylonase and bacterial immunities is what evolutionists go to so much because that's all they have, and that is not evidence of evolution.
What about the one I
Okay.
just cited to you, Nev?
Does it change? Which is what?
I repeated it twice, but okay. Chlamydomonas.
Well, you were busy
which
interrupting
went,
me.
wait,
so I
wait, you're
wasn't
interrupting
listening.
me now, Nev. Come on now. Chlamydomonas, which went from single-celled to multi-celled.
We don't know of any multicellular organisms arising.
I just told you one.
He literally
No,
just cited
what we,
one.
What we know is that things like species like algae can form colonies, which benefits their survival. But that doesn't constitute a multicellular organism because a multicellular organism is a creature which has multicellular, intercellular systems. It has
Exactly.
respiratory, excretory, it has nervous, it has digestive. These are systems. What you're citing is a group of bacteria or algae forming a colony which don't have any intercellular systems. That's not multicellularity, friend.
So if I may respond, what I was citing was exactly multicellularity with the exact systems that you're talking about. It is not a colony. And
no,
if you
sir.
let me respond, Neff, I only was talking for 4 seconds there. In the Chlamydomonas example, it is definitively not a colony because the hallmarks of what makes something a colony are that each individual of the colony reproduces on its own and is competing with the others for resources. However, in the Chlamydomonas example, there was a differentiation between somatic cells and reproductive cells. They have different properties. They were part of different systems. One of them was the somatic cells were creating extracellular matrices, which formed a multicellular body for this organism. And the reproductive cells were the only ones that were reproducing. They were sharing resources across the entire organism. This is not a colony. It does not meet the definition of a colony in any sense.
So I have a question about that, Grayson. Okay, here's my question. I'm not familiar with the example you're citing, but I have some very strong understanding of things based on what my experience in dealing with evolutionists. My question is this. Are you citing a creature that was observed to come into being, or are you citing a creature that scientists discover and then philosophize backwards about how it gained its components?
The first example.
Okay, so
I will post the study right here. It is literally called the de novo origin.
And how does the divergence?
You cut out there, Grayson.
How does this is bacteria you're pointing to? Is that correct?
Chlamydomonas. It's not a bacteria. It's like a single cellular algae.
Algae, right?
Importantly, this algae does not have these as part of their life cycle. It's never been observed in nature to do this.
So if there, I understand these algae colonies. So what intercellular systems were observed to come into being in this colony of algae? Huh?
Yes, I already described the two of them.
No, you did not.
Did everybody else hear me describe them?
No, I heard you talking
did.
about
I
things,
think Neff was interrupting you.
You didn't tell us what specific intercellular system has evolved in these creatures.
Did I not tell you that there was the somatic system that is creating extracellular matrix to hold the thing together as a body, and it no longer has the mobility individual? See, you're interrupting me again rather than letting me talk here. And then there are the reproductive systems, which are the cells that are the sole ones that reproduce. So not every cell is reproducing here. They're working as an actual whole multicellular body. Those are the two systems, somatic cells and the reproductive cells.
Okay, so you're saying when they reproduce, then if this is reproduction of the organism, instead of some of the algae shutting off their reproduction and others continuing it, you're saying that when they reproduce, you get a duplicate of the same set of algae. Is that correct? Otherwise, there is no organism that's being reproduced.
Yes, when they reproduce,
so that doesn't happen. So your claim is false.
No, Neff, you didn't let me finish.
It's not a new organism.
hold on, Neff. Hold on.
Neff, let him finish.
I didn't get to finish my statement.
When the reproduction cells reproduce, right? They form the same multicellular units. These are like each generation is still multicellular. It doesn't go back to single cellularity.
No, you're saying this colony of algae
It's not a
if
colony.
it reproduces, then the exact
No.
same colony of algae is produced by duplication. There has to be if it's reproduction, then one has to begat the other. But see, that doesn't happen.
That is what happens.
That is not what happens.
It is what happens.
No, sir. You just
Well,
lied.
so Neff, I'm the one that's read the study. You're the one that's not familiar
Fine.
with it. So why
I've
are you
studied
dictating
this.
to me what happens when
'Cause
I know it and you don't?
I've looked into the algae thing.
You haven't.
I studied this thing 18 years ago. Look,
This came out in 2019, Neff.
There's no colony of algae that is coming into being by reproduction. It doesn't.
You're right.
Begat,
it's not a colony.
It doesn't begat another colony of algae. Therefore,
You're right. It's not a colony.
It's not organismal reproduction. See?
It is.
No, wait. Show us the paper that says that this creature has a womb of some kind and it begats another like itself.
It doesn't need a womb, Neff. That's
right.
not necessary.
It doesn't. Individuals repeat individuals group together that are not related to each other. In fact, and repeat the same process. It's not reproduction of an organism. That's a false claim.
Okay, Nephilim free. What Grayson is essentially talking about.
I know what he's talking about.
Is let me finish. What Grayson is talking about is an algal. It is a collection of algae that produces more collections of algae as a single unit. It has generations. It has children.
No,
it is
individual.
Unless I'm wrong, it is asexual reproduction, but it is reproduction.
It can't be reproduction if the organism doesn't come into being as it is. It's not organismal reproduction. It's algae which have turned on or off the reproduction process, grouping with other algae, and the same thing is happening under this log, and it's happening in that pond of water, and it's happening under that rock.
No, it's not. That's
not
a lie.
An organismal reproduction. So that's
You're
not
lying.
an example of evolution. I'm sorry. This kind of change, this kind of selective adaptation within a colony of algae doesn't constitute organismal reproduction. Sorry,
Neff,
it's
you
not
are just
evolutionary
lying.
change, okay, what you have to have is organismal reproduction that that morphs organisms towards becoming a fundamentally different kind of organism, and nobody knows about.
That is exactly what this is.
No, you're just lying about the example. Does it have a womb and reproduce by embryonic development?
Why does it need a womb? Why are you hung up on it needing a womb?
Then it's not organismal reproduction.
Wait. You think that without a womb there can be no such thing as organismal reproduction?
It's
so
not
wait.
Reproduction.
What would it be?
So plants don't have a womb, Neff. So plants are not organismal reproduction?
It's or algae repeatedly forming colonies. It's not organismal reproduction.
Okay, but you agree
what is the process then? What is
multicellular?
And therefore,
wait.
Maybe there's a different process, guys.
Multicellular, right? And they reproduce, but they don't have a womb.
It's not organismal reproduction. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so you're gonna keep repeating your mantra now because you got
Grayson. Hold on, Grayson. Just what Neff? Can you describe then what it is that they are undergoing?
Sure, I've already said so. People don't listen. The algae have adapted to either reproduce or not reproduce. Okay, other algae cling to them and form a colony. Okay, that's what this has been studied for many years. There are countless creationist articles about this failed evolution claim. Okay, so it's nothing more than a colony of algae that specialize themselves within the colony for either reproduction or not.
So,
but they don't organismally
let me ask you
reproduce.
a question.
Wait, Doc,
Therefore,
really
it doesn't support the idea of organismal reproduction coming into being.
So you So I think, guys,
I'm being interrupted already.
Hold on.
You guys, I know. I'm just going to drop out because you guys are.
Okay, Grayson.
Wait, he said he was going to quit. So just I want to make sure because
If he quits, he can quit.
wait, because he made the claim that we were not listening. So I just want to ask him if he was listening to me, because I specifically addressed and I gave reasons why this cannot be an example of just a colony. And I listed what those reasons were. So I want to ask Neff,
Okay, so
were you
no,
listening?
I'm not
Can you
answering any
repeat
more
back to me
questions.
what I gave as my
When you
reason?
guys are not able to, when you have the courage to discuss things without muting and over talking your creationist opponent every 11 seconds, you'll be worthy opponents. At this point, you guys are not ready.
Neff,
Take
can you
care.
please just repeat back to me what I already listed as being the reasons why this cannot be a call? Okay, he left.
Okay.
Oh,
I mean,
oh.
talk about a hypocrite.
Okay. Hey, Grayson.
Does anyone else want to give a stab at Grayson's question?
Well, I sort of can I ask you something, Grayson? I know you were mentioning, some of the reasons and some of the things that you were mentioning, like some of the processes, the systems that would have to be developed and upped and all that. I'm wondering where does the cytochrome C fit into this whole experience of the new functional developments? Isn't it not that it is the most important metabolic underlying activity that's coming out from the cytochrome C that's going to be facilitating everything, so to speak? I'm just wondering what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think most organisms, right, have some sort of analog for like cytochrome complexes. So it seems to be a pretty fundamental process across whether or not you're using your energy source from like a sulfur compound or methane or like the sun or other organisms. Like you're gonna have some kind of way of using like a cytochrome like complex to harvest that energy.
Yeah, okay, because I'm wondering, isn't it though that before any organism can really engage in a new function, or rather using the new function, wouldn't they need to have had the cytochrome C already developed up in their system to, let's say, perform, for example, if they got gills or lungs or whatever it is, to perform the metabolic or aerobic transfer, or whatever's going on there on the cellular level? Wouldn't that all need to be coming out first from the cytochrome there?
I believe that cytochrome like C-like proteins are pretty basal. Like I think like Luca, like the last universal common ancestor for all life today, had an analog of cytochrome C.
So if they all had it, why is it so different between creatures to the point where we could say this species we can identify it, but because it's cytochrome C is different than that species. Not saying that we can identify because of that, but rather they're all different. Why is that so?
Okay, so largely overall, cytochrome C is like highly conserved across like a huge amount of different species. There are like subtle differences because like you can have like just like there are some parts of a protein that are absolutely necessary for it to function. And if you change it, then you compromise the function. There are other parts that can change and vary and you don't really affect the overall function that much.
Right, but isn't because you mentioned it's a highly conserved region, right? So isn't it an incredibly specific shape, or else it wouldn't work at all?
Yeah, but you can change a protein in a way that doesn't change the part of its shape that's necessary for it to do its function.
Right. I mean, other highly conserved proteins too. They're not as impacted as much on the side shape due to the other amino acids that could fit in 100%. But what I'm curious about with this one though, it seems that for anaerobic activity, it really has to be very specific, or else it's not really going to work out. With other different sequences, fine, but this one, it's not so big, but it's supposedly very specific.
Yeah, so what I'm explaining to you is that the part of cytochrome C that is necessary for it to function is highly conserved across all species, and there's not much variation. The parts of cytochrome C which are less necessary are the parts where you start to see those variations across different species.
Okay, yeah. I thought I was trying to get at the fact that maybe the C protein, the site itself is different from a species to species, because it's remarkable how all this new information and this new data comes out, and then it's like, wow, you're second guessing some of the things that you knew before. And I just want to let you guys know before with the whole consciousness idea, and I know you guys were kind of like not taking it too seriously, because it's a term. You judge the concept by the term and all that, but actually in science, so if you wanted to look it up yourself, it's called horizontal gene transfer.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what I think our friend there was trying to allude to with the whole consciousness idea, and I think horizontal gene transfer is a pretty new and convincing idea, hypothesis. It's not a theory yet, but it's a working hypothesis, and it's pretty interesting.
It's not a hypothesis; it's a fact. We've observed horizontal gene transfer.
Okay, all right, great. So cool. It's very interesting, right? So it's like, we have the bottleneck, but then we have all these creatures they're coming up with what we think is some evolutionary thing, but then it's like, wait a minute, maybe it was actually hidden there deep down inside in the first place from generations ago. You know what I mean? It's interesting to think about.
I just want to say, I don't think that what he was getting at was related to horizontal gene transfer.
Oh, okay.
But yes, horizontal gene transfer is a real function. It's where two different species can transfer genetic information from one to the other. It's not common in eukaryotes. It happens mainly in single cell prokaryotes.
See, right, but now lately I've been reading about how multicellular organisms, even large, complex ones, actually, I think at one point a leopard, I was reading a leopard was actually saved from its own bottleneck because of this process. It's very cool.
I
So,
mean,
it's very
I don't know,
right,
Bryson, do you
because we
think
think
it
about
maybe
where do
happened
these
in-
functions come from? But then it's like, wait a minute, maybe they were baked in, so to speak.
I think that you can have a horizontal gene transfer potentially occur between a bacteria and an animal, but I'm not aware of any specific cases. But you do have viruses and bacteria that will inject genetic material into an animal's genome, so that the mechanism is in place for that. We have retroviruses that routinely put their genetic material into our genomes, and that leaves a record of these things, which reproduces the evolutionary tree.
Yeah, and also when I brought up the Arabica plants before, that turned out it wasn't the horizontal transfer. So that's a whole different thing that they do. It's called chromosome scale assembly, and it's very interesting because it reveals aberrations, because some of these genes are coming from continents away. It's like, wow. But my whole thing is that I used to think that evolution and was set in stone, but from this whole concept of mutations. But now I realize I see these other things that that's coming out. We're discovering that actually seem to have a bigger play on why creatures are having those genes than just chalking it up to an infinitesimal amount of random mutations building up over time. You know what I mean?
If I may,
Thank you.
I think that evolution is an interesting topic, and there is always more to learn about it. I am just curious though. Does anyone here think evolution never happens? Ever. Never at all. Does anyone hold that position?
Yeah, so this is where we have to get down more.
We got to define it.
Defining it.
Fair.
We got to define it just so we're on the same page and we're not talking over and yelling at each other and all that. Because it comes down to the nitty gritties, right? We're all intelligent enough. We've studied this enough, and it's going to come down to nuances at the end of the day. It's not really we can't really stick to the bigger concept. We got to go to the nuances.
Fair enough. And can I just say, I like that you guys asked for a definition. I really genuinely appreciate that.
Yeah, it's like this. Like, for example, did we? If you're talking about evolutions in the terms of is a banana related to a human being? No. If you're talking about evolution in terms of did 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 man eventually have a point? Was there a reason for an appendix at one point where now it's seen as a, what do you call it? Vitrical,
Vestigial.
Vestigial.
So I mean, in terms of something happened where, you know, maybe the type of food that we were eating, you no longer need that part there, so that, you know, there would be some kind of evolution.
But do you believe that all cats are descended from a cat kind?
Um, even that's hard. Even that's hard to put a pin on it, because I think I've raised this question before on questions about Noah's Ark. Like, for someone to say that there was only like what is it, one pair of male and female cats, whatever this you know, alpha cat is, like when you think in your mind the perfect chair, that's like the perfect cat, and then those two cats spawned off all the existing types of cats we have now. I have an issue with that personally as a creationist. I would say that there were probably a handful of different types of cats on Noah's Ark, that once they interbreed, then you have that. Like, if you take a German Shepherd and a Husky and you breed them together, then you're going to have a different type of dog altogether. So I mean, is that evolution? I don't know, you know.
I think, Doc, you should have asked your question instead of saying evolution. You probably should have said universal common ancestry.
Well, I kind of want to build up to that. So, I guess if we're sharing definitions of evolution, I guess given my personal definition, I would say that evolution is change in a population of organisms over the course of successive generations. Now, those changes can be genetic, they can be physical, they can be metabolic or behavioral. But there are changes in the population over time. Does anyone disagree with that definition, or does anyone think that doesn't happen?
I think I agree with that.
I don't disagree.
I want to kind of add this in here and kind of just touch bases back on the concept of evolutionary consciousness. So we know, like, the Charles Darwin and his kind of observations on the Galapagos was that certain birds had developed beak sizes that were specifically like the exact same size required for the corresponding plant that they were you know, retrieving nectar from, right, or whatever it is. So the beak shape was directly correlated with the available vegetation in the area, right? So kind of when I talk about like this consciousness, it's more of that understanding, like, did the plant, for the intention of survival, understand that it needed to change the size of its petals in order to prevent the nectar from being taken? And in following, the birds also adjusted the shape and size of their beaks to kind of follow along with that change, right? So it's like kind of it's like a moving target, right?
Okay, wait. Can I just, with an analogy for this, right? Because no, the answer is no to your question, and this is an analogy that I'll do. If a hurricane strikes a village and some of the buildings are broken apart by the hurricane and some of the buildings are strong enough to where they are still standing, did the buildings or the hurricanes have any conscious decision making at all anytime in that process? The answer is no.
No, but that's not a good example, because if I am an architect and I notice the buildings that survived the hurricane, then I'm gonna continue to build homes in that like manner, right? Put hurricane straps, whatever it is.
The humans are the DNA in this example.
The analogy breaks down when you're trying to add multiple generations to it. My analogy is for what natural selection is. Like, Natural selection is not a conscious process. It's the same as the hurricane, right? It's something that happens. And the way that these buildings are reacting to the hurricane is also not a conscious process. It just happens from physics.
Okay,
Right, but it's not an ex post facto method. It's not that the evolutionary trait happens after an event occurs which leads to this new variant becoming the dominant design. So that doesn't happen after. It's that the original function was already there per se. It may have been selected, or they may have been a small percentage of existing creatures who had that gene, that function. Then an event occurred where the other ones who didn't have that function were not able to survive as well, and so just naturally the surviving variant then became the dominant design, so to speak, of that species gene pool. But that happens before. But you see, the function was before. It's not like necessarily that.
But he wasn't asking about that. Like, I'm just answering the question that he asked about, do the plants decide what to grow or how to change? No, they don't decide. There's no conscious decision making.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Are the birds? Why is the bird's beak changing then?
Because there's natural variation in the population.
So the birds that just happen to have that slimmer beak, they're the ones that were able to get the food, and the other ones died off.
Yes, that's natural selection.
But is that evolution?
Yeah.
No. Is that, sorry? Because remember, I just want to jump back. I wasn't entirely satisfied with the definition.
Let me provide a definition then. Let me provide, and this is a very pretty much universally accepted definition here: change in allele frequency over time.
Right, but the thing is, I don't believe that the other camp is disagreeing with you guys in regards to the change. I think the disagreement is in regards to what is causing the change, specifically.
No, I do think the difference is that the other side doesn't think that changes can add up over time to be bigger scale changes.
Well, not changes. No. Remember, we got to discuss kind of changes, because what they're saying is that defective changes, so degenerative changes over time would not lead up to a fully programmed and functional part. That's what is, but so it's a matter of what is the process that is creating or leading to the change. Is it a degenerative mutational process? No, right? But that is isn't that what evolution? Well,
just a second. So, okay, first let's go with the degenerative idea. So, are mutations always degenerative? Genuine question here.
No, right. They're not. It's let's say, going by your idea, it is a random process. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, but something's happening and something's being changed in lieu of it, which we may or may not be able to observe with our toolings.
Now, next question. So if there are positive mutations, if there are neutral ones, if there are negative ones, if an organism has a negative mutation that makes it harder to survive, do you think it'll have as many children?
Oh, it depends. It depends on what the mutation is. It depends on how it impacts their ability to breed.
He just said.
Mm-hmm.
He just said if it's a mutation that negatively impacts their ability to breed.
No. Oh, well, it negatively impacts their ability to breed.
Are you guys arguing that natural selection is evolution?
It is part of evolution, yes.
Yeah, but see, so the thing is with evolution, like we said about the ones with the slimmer beak, they continue to be able to have access to food. They continue reproducing. All the other ones died off. That there's no evolution going on here.
So let me be clear. Not all of the other birds died off, but more of the birds with slimmer beaks reproduced.
Yeah, so but this is getting into gene.
On average, had slimmer beaks. The population changed over successive generations, or as Grayson put it, the allele frequency, so the genes that control for the beak size, changed in between generation, or changed over the course of generations.
Yeah, but
In
I
population.
still don't think that that's evolution. Would you say if a
That's the
black
definition of
if a-
evolution, my
yeah,
dude.
but if a black man has a baby with a white woman and they produce a mixed baby, is that evolution?
Look, evolution happens
Is
in
that
population.
evolution?
I'm answering your question, Josh.
It's a yes or no.
It's not a yes or no. Let me
It
answer.
is a yes or no.
I'm going to give you an answer, okay?
Let Grayson explain.
Evolution happens in populations. You have to look at what the current allele frequency in a population is versus what it is in future generations. So, yes, if the allele frequency in a population changes over time, that is definitionally evolution. So,
Well,
in your example,
yeah.
if that was
No.
happening in the entire population, that would be evolution.
So if enough black men and enough white women reproduce and have enough mixed babies, and those mixed babies continue to have babies with each other, eventually we'd have another species.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. If that happens, then the allele frequencies of that population have changed. Thus, it is evolution. You don't need a new
Well,
species for it to count as
It's-
evolution.
Grayson, I would disagree with you on that thought, because I wouldn't necessarily say that an infrequent allele being selected upon conception is an example of evolution, because the infrequent allele was already in the species' genome. So
That's
it was
still
just a
look,
matter.
I'm giving you the
Well,
definition
Yeah,
of
so
evolution here.
is this your
listen.
definition, or is this the textbook definition?
It's not the creation of new alleles. It's the change in the frequencies of an allele. Like if here's a very simple example. You have a population here. There's only two alleles, A and B. A starts off at 40% and B
Yes.
starts off at 60%.
Sure.
Then you go back in a couple generations and you still only have those two alleles, but now A is at 90% and B is at 10%.
I'm with you.
Is an evolutionary change.
No, Grace, I'm with you. I'm with you on the numbers. I'm just saying from the idea. Think about it just from a different perspective. If the allele was already there, and you just said it yourself, no new information, nothing new was created. It was an already existing allele. So then, how isn't that what they are also saying, that they're arguing with you about? They're telling you that it's not that something randomly new was created; it was an already existing thing. And
but
aren't you just saying that? How right? But that's why I'm telling you guys, there's so much headbutting, because you're calling that evolution, but they think that that's also a correct concept in nature to be found, but they're calling it they're saying it's not evolution. So what you guys are agree on a lot more than what you think.
That's why I already told you where the difference of opinion lies. I already explained this. The difference is that they do not think that those changes add up over time to large changes. That's where the difference of opinion lies.
No, right. But what I'm saying is that you've already sort of agreed that this is a pre-existing function that's in the genome, that is not something new that's created by a mutational aspect or something new, or it's just not new. It was already there, and that's what they're saying too.
So what?
I'm saying, well, the whole thing is that whether or not evolution, the idea that a process that's random and happening sporadically and illogically and mathematically impossible.
That's not evolution.
What? So how do random changes over time lead to an entirely functional part? A new functional part. How does the changes over time lead to that versus selection? No, but we just said that the natural selection is selecting for an already existing gene that was in its genomic library.
Okay. Mutations are what creates the new information. Natural selection, it selects from the variation that's created by mutations. It's a two-step process. You can't just say mutations are evolution, and you can't just say it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, they go together. They add on top of each other.
Well, everything does. If you're putting a complex theory together, sure, they're all variables. That's why we're trying to take them apart one by one and discuss them and see whether or not each specific building block of the larger concept is actually
Okay, so
logically valid.
you agree
So-
that mutations can create new information in the genome.
Yes.
That is
New
beneficial.
new information, but we're well, I haven't gone there yet. We're talking about how the
I know.
allele, infrequent
asking
allele
you.
already exists.
I'm asking
Ah,
you because you're stuck
yeah.
on whether or not, like, because I'm saying it is evolution regardless of whether or not new information comes into play. It doesn't matter. But you're stuck on this idea of new information and whether or not it previously existed. So that's why I'm coming to mutations, because that's the process that creates the
Ah,
new information. So that's why I'm asking you, do you agree that mutations create new information that can be beneficial?
that can be beneficial. New information that can be beneficial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's say you have your code, you got a mutation, something happened to you. Okay, you think something beneficial. Let's say you don't have psoriasis, right? You're not getting some
It's like
seborrheic.
sickle cell and malaria.
But sickle cell, yeah, but that's not really a benefit because
Okay, I posted an example in the side chat a few
Yeah.
minutes ago showing a mutation that occurs that changes the actual structure of an enzyme. It adds an entirely new structure that is functionally beneficial for it.
So
And this is something new they've never seen anywhere in nature
Yes,
before. It's never
correct.
been observed in any other organism ever.
Correct.
Right.
So it
Pause.
wouldn't be possible
Really
that there
quick.
was any sort of horizontal gene transfer or
Correct.
any sort of right. Okay, so this is completely new. And
Yes.
hold on, I gotta read up on this. That's
Here,
cool.
sorry. You don't have here, can I give a real quick example here?
Yeah.
Just talking about, can you look at the screen, the thing I'm sharing right now? You see
Yeah.
the
No.
dinosaur on screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
We love them.
Okay. So
I
let's
love
say
this
we
game.
have this
Yeah.
dinosaur. This dinosaur has a mutation that its
Mm.
sibling doesn't have. It
Mhm.
has slightly sharper teeth, so it's easier for it to
Yeah.
kill prey and eat the body. Okay?
Well,
It
okay.
will generally get more food than its sibling
Uh-huh.
does. It has had a mutation
Okay.
that benefits
Yeah.
it.
No,
Now-
I hear you. I hear you. You think that having larger and sharper teeth is a beneficial mutation, but what I would say
It's
is
in
that
this
we
environment.
can't confirm that
Yes.
because we don't necessarily have enough tooling to observe. So what I can tell you is just from my, let's say, my rational mind, is that if this dinosaur did actually have larger teeth and sharper teeth than what its mouth was supposed to be able to handle, then it was probably crushing up its own jaw and cutting its gums up and probably
so
prone to
what-
bacterial infections and other jaw mandible
what-
issues and whatnot,
Okay.
maybe sinus
I
problems, and it
understand
didn't
what
have a
you're
good quality of
saying.
life.
Sorry, I understand what you're saying. In this
Yeah.
example, the teeth
Yeah.
are just a little sharper and it can eat more food. That is all in this example.
Right.
This
So
is
if
why
they're
I
a little
asked you,
sharper, then they're
this is
no
why I
longer.
asked you originally, straight up. I asked you, do you think mutations can occur that introduce new information that is beneficial? That's why I asked you this question.
I think that on one hand, with some we can see that there is a benefit, and we can often not see the negative that is in lieu of the benefit, and that's possibly because we're limited by the tools and the observational procedures that we can set up to see if there
So
was
are
a
you saying
negative.
no? It's a yes or no question.
Yeah, but
Well-
when I ask a yes or no question, you can't give me a straight answer.
Did you think that my answer was not a straight answer?
Yeah, I didn't think so. But
Because I literally straight up answered it. Do you know what my answer was?
when I asked you if different races have a baby, is that considered evolution? And then you went off saying that if it happens enough and the allele percentage changes, then yes. That's what you said, right?
There you go. That is a direct
So
answer.
he
All
answered
right,
your
you want one
question.
too? I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I'm not trying to like straw man you. Like, I get what
No,
you're
you
saying. I don't
didn't
agree
straw
with
man
it.
me. You answered exactly how I answered, which was a direct answer to your question. I don't see why you're saying it's not.
I don't think it is. But let me kind of ask this, because is there an evolutionary mutation that allows for cross speciation?
Like instant speciation?
No, he
No,
said cross
because
speciation as in
here's
like
the thing, right? Because we're describing See, when I took anthropology, sorry, I'm not trying to like, I took like one class. It was specifically related to reproductive success. Now, when I think evolution, I associate it with that reproductive success, the traits that are going to be more likely to produce more offsprings
Sure.
are the ones that are going to get passed along. So, for example, we're talking about the dinosaur. If it has slightly sharper teeth, we're assuming that that's related with being able to eat more, right? So let's just grant you that. Then they're eating more of the food, so that particular dinosaur with sharper teeth is going to reproduce with other dinosaurs, having offsprings that potentially also have sharp teeth until eventually, as you would say, the allele count changes, and now only the sharp tooth dinosaurs are roaming the land, right? So this is kind of the example that you're trying to portray as evolution. Now, I
Yes,
think that
that
it's
is evolution.
yeah, I think this is definitely like the Punnett squares, you know, like there's a trade
Yes.
there's a trade in traits in DNA going on. But my question is here, is there an evolutionary mutation, for example, that this one dinosaur just so happens to be able to breed with that other dinosaur that it previously wasn't able to?
Mm,
Not really.
I will say a cautious no. So, in order for two animals to reproduce, they have to be similar enough in their DNA. They usually need to have at least a similar number of chromosomes. It's complicated. The DNA sequences have to match up enough to produce a viable offspring. And even from there, it's a whole other question if that offspring can reproduce.
Yeah, but what I'm
Like a
saying is it
horse, well,
possible for
just as
that
an
one
example, a
dinosaur
horse and
to?
a donkey
Oh,
can reproduce, but the mule that they make is usually sterile, right?
I
Yeah,
think
but
you could just directly
what I'm
answer the
saying is
question as saying that the
if
odds of it happening are
yeah.
so astronomically small that it's probably not going to happen. That you're going to have like
Yeah.
a
Well,
bird
I mean
mutate
that
guys,
where
that
it can
that in
reproduce
its
with a
own
lobster.
that
they
in its
just found
own
this out in the
that's
blue whales. They just recently discovered that some whales are mating with other random species in the water. They're calling it something called genetic swamping, and it shouldn't. Some people are afraid because it's like leading to hybrid animals and offspring,
That
which
sounds
is
like fake
Sorry,
news.
well, I
sorry,
mean
source, please.
it's
That
yeah,
sounds
I'd love
the
interesting.
to.
question is that
Right? Interesting, yeah.
this
Well,
Cool.
I'm going
concept
to call
needs to
total
be
bullshit on it, actually.
this
I don't
concept
know.
needs to be viably feasible, because I don't understand how, like, let's say the earliest ancestors of whatever particular animal, like, they must have at one point been able to have some type of mutation that allowed them to breed with another animal. So say, for example, they
No.
originally had 20 chromosomes. This one particular dinosaur was born with 21 chromosomes, and now that's opened up the window of the animals that it can potentially breed with. So I
No,
mean,
that's not how it
Not,
happens. That is not how that
not
works.
really, no.
You
Also,
don't
this
just all of a sudden have a
game
bird
crushed.
have a mutation that it can now reproduce with a lobster.
that's
Oops.
that sounds crazy, right? Because that's out of this world, right?
Yes.
That's how I feel about
Yeah,
evolution, man.
But
that
that's not
doesn't
at
track
all
with
how
how we
evolution
know
works.
biology works.
In fact, like if that happened, that would revolutionize our entire understanding of like that is not at all what evolution says should happen.
Can man breed with a monkey?
No.
Okay, but at
Not
one
as
point
far as we
but
know.
what you want
No.
me to believe with evolution is that at one point a monkey mutated itself enough to become man, and then now there's no back.
Okay, Josh, let me
Okay.
break this down to you, okay? You understand that Chihuahuas and Great Danes cannot reproduce with each are descended from wolf ancestors.
You cut off. Can you repeat that again? I don't know if you cut off for everyone
Okay,
else.
Chihuahuas and Great Danes cannot reproduce with each other, but They both evolved from wolves. Like a wolf and a chihuahua cannot interbreed.
Yeah, I actually don't know that a Chihuahua could or couldn't. So I'm just gonna take your word for it that there's no way
The
to take
anatomy doesn't work. You would
I
have
know.
to artificially inseminate it.
Okay,
And
well,
just to
I mean,
bolster what
the
Grayson's
Great
saying,
Dane could lay on its side, and the Chihuahua can do its thing. What do you mean?
So-
That does not work.
so just to explain this, it has been tried. It is super dangerous for the Chihuahua if it gets pregnant, and it just does not work if the Great Dane gets pregnant. It does not work. People have tried.
Yeah, but see, so we're trying to stick within the realm of like, what did you call it? The common ancestor. So we all agree, what we're all trying to agree on is that all of these dog type animals that exist today all descended from a similar type wolf that had all of the generic variation, kept producing different types
Well,
of
it didn't
dogs.
necessarily have all the variation. Like, dogs have been selectively bred. That introduces a lot of variables.
There are genes that dogs have that wolves do not have.
Okay, so I guess my question is still like, at what point do these things start to branch off? Like, are certain species able to reproduce, and then at one point or another, they're no longer able to produce, even if you did artificial insemination?
So it's a spectrum. As species get more isolated environmentally, sexually, like they become less and less able to interbreed. Sometimes it's a sudden switch where you have suddenly a mutation that changes the chromosome number, and then like all of a sudden in one generation they're no longer interfertile. But otherwise, you can have like where they're separated in different environments where they could hybridize, but they don't in nature because they're living in separate environments. And then over time, they become more and more like non-interfertile. So like it's a spectrum. These things have been observed. Look at ring species. This is an excellent example of exactly this process where over time these different branches become more and more divergent and less able to hybridize.
Also, really quick, just to address what was said before about whales creating hybrids.
Fin whale
So
and blue
first,
whale. Yeah.
well, first, thank you for sharing the link. Appreciated.
It's
The
interesting,
article
right?
is talking about different species of whales hybridizing. That's not super surprising. It's interesting, but it's not
Yeah.
super surprising.
It's not like a whale suddenly getting it on with a great white, and now they got a great
Exactly.
white.
No, but it's all these things. It's all these little things that you just can't. It becomes harder and harder to ignore as we make more discoveries over time.
No one's
you know?
ignoring that.
No,
No.
similar
I'm
animals
saying
can
in one's
hybridize.
own
That
head.
happens.
In one's own head, right? Like it's like then a seed starts growing in your mind, and you're like, wait a minute, like we're learning
What
more.
seed? What are you talking about?
The ideas that we learned when we were younger about this whole field
That
of
doesn't
science.
contradict anything.
Okay,
What do you mean?
Would you say that a shark and a whale descended from a common ancestor?
Yes.
That was some type of amphibian type animal?
No.
No.
Hey, I'm just saying, like the things that you studied in high school and college. Well, I don't know how old you
Really
guys
quick.
are.
Let me
But
just answer that, and then I'll answer what you're saying. But like the common ancestor between a whale and a shark is the same common ancestor between a human and a shark, or a bird and a shark.
Okay, so you're going way too far back. I'm talking about like,
No, you're going too far back because that's your example was a shark and a whale. I'm telling you, their common ancestor was the same common ancestor for all tetrapods and sharks.
what's
Yeah,
a
we're
tetrapod?
talking
Sorry?
something on the
A
order of
tetrapod is
500
an
million years ago.
amphibian, a reptile, a mammal, a bird. All of those are tetrapods, and all of them have the same last common ancestor with sharks. And if you want evidence for this, because we can provide evidence for this, if you actually look at the genomes of a goldfish and a shark and a human, the goldfish genome is more similar to a human's than the goldfish is to a shark's.
Let me just ask you this question. Now I'm going to hop off here after this, just for the panel. I
Sure.
mean, then I'm not trying to be condescending or nothing. How much faith do you think an evolutionist has for their belief in comparison to a creationist?
Very little. Different ballparks. Like very, very little.
Yeah.
So you
so-
would say that most evolutionists like they have very little doubt in their belief?
Because you have evidence that justifies those beliefs as being true, aka knowledge.
So
Yeah,
really
but
quick.
your evidence is
no,
your evidence.
Sorry,
is
really,
based
really
on-
quick.
Go ahead.
To echo something we asked before, what are you defining as faith? That's very important to this. What is your definition?
Well, the definition of faith is not having observed it of your own ability, right? I wasn't there to observe God create the world in 7 days, the same way that you weren't there to see the common ancestor break off into all these different animals. And the available evidence, as you would say, is debatable. It's been debated
Okay.
for a long time. So I mean,
It's
I
really
just feel
not
like,
debatable, to be honest.
oh, so you just trust all the scientists and their experiments and just trust all of that?
So when science is done, the process is written down in a lot of detail.
I'm very familiar with the scientific method, man.
Yeah, it's written down. It can be repeated, and you can see at least similar things happening in your daily life. Like the process of evolution is pretty, well, not simple, but it's easy to understand.
It's not observable.
It doesn't stretch the limits of credulity.
It is observable.
Yes.
And never in our lifetime are we going to see man evolve into anything else. It's got to a stagnant point according to evolutionists.
Because
No.
that would
That's not true.
So we're going to start growing wings eventually, or what's the next step? What's the next step in our evolution?
Bro, you're
No.
just putting out absurd statements now.
Okay, so you want to know how humans will probably evolve?
Yes, please.
So based on our current trajectory, based on human current trajectories, I'd say they'll probably become better at being social because more social people will have more offspring. So the populations will change. That's
Yeah,
a
this is
probable
a-
trajectory.
Would you say that there's a logical and ordered assumption that what we're making in regards to the trajectory of our evolution? It's not chaotic, right? It's not like we're going to randomly, as you say, grow the wings and all that, right? Where it's going to be, as you're saying, we're going to evolve, we're going to have more children. It's going to be maybe we're going to have maybe different bodies or something like that. That's going to be purpose for socialization. But it's not like we're going to grow lizard tails and 3 heads. Right?
Personally, I think the
Yeah.
humans are a very bad example because we're able to genetically engineer ourselves and other species. So I just think it's a bad example to make predictions.
I mean, pick a wild animal like a pigeon.
Okay.
Ooh.
But again,
Okay.
the predictions that evolution makes
What's
are
the next step for a
repeatable and
pigeon?
Yeah, but
observable.
they're logical. They're logical. Like I don't think a pigeon is going to randomly. I don't think the trajectory of evolution for a pigeon, at least, is going to end up. It's not going to end up turning into a turtle.
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
very
well,
soon.
you
Right.
gotta look
Yeah.
at the social construct of a pigeon, right? So as man continues to build and they're knocking down trees, now they're moving from the type of environment where they had an abundance amount of trees, shade, areas to find, hide, seek for cover. Now what do you have? You have pigeons in city skylights, sitting on electrical wires, getting their feet charred up. Most of them don't even have. I mean, pigeons can be missing a whole wing, a whole foot, a whole eye.
Mhm.
Damn near their head can be missing, and they'll still be alive. So I mean, like, I think that might also be a bad example because of all
No,
the
it's a
human.
good one. It's
Well,
a good
so
one because they're not going to turn into
to
a
answer
turtle
your
anytime
question-
soon,
They'll
right?
never
So it
turn
means
into a turtle.
it means that there's a logical order to how things are evolving, so to speak. So there's a sense to this. There's an understanding. So in the trajectories of.
I think that's a fun question. Can I ask you to try to answer it? What trajectory do you think pigeons will take in this changed environment?
Yeah, I
Like,
think
what do you think would happen using
Yeah.
what you know of the
I think
process of
I think
evolution,
like
assuming it
the pigeons
occurs?
the pigeons that have like more like stronger, thicker styles of feet are gonna, start to survive more because let's just take a look at the example where they're sitting on power lines and their feet are getting charred up. Well, the ones that have those thinner feet with a thinner kind of skin around their feet, those are eventually gonna not be able to move as much, won't be able to reproduce as much. Now the ones that are born with just bigger feet in general, they have a better ability at observe of like taking in that initial shock and kind of getting the hint, like, let me get off
That's
this
evolution.
Sure, and I think that's a good hypothesis. Something I would predict is their diets are probably going to become ever more varied because humans make a lot of trash and they throw a lot of food away. So pigeons that can eat more of that food, well, they'll probably do better and they'll have more kids.
The ones that aren't spontaneously combusting are gonna live.
Yeah,
It
that's
sounds
true.
like it sounds like
pretty
a
good
very
for-
intelligently
bad for your
designed
life.
trajectory.
Well, sometimes random chance. Well, not exactly random chance.
That's the thing. That's the thing, though. Where I think it all
Sometimes-
boils down to like random chance versus baked in
But no matter
programming of your DNA.
no
No,
matter
it
how much
doesn't.
we go down this rabbit hole, the thing is that we can all agree that in the next 10 or 15 different stages of evolution from where a pigeon is now, it would still bear a very similar resemblance to the current pigeon, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, things get more and more different over time.
But then
But
why
they
and
always
how
remain what
would
they
a
already
creature
were.
over time build up the entire building blocks necessary for an organ it doesn't need yet?
It wouldn't.
They don't.
That's right. So then
That's not how evolution
right?
works, though.
So then how is it that you end up with a creature with a lung, a fish with a lung, when it didn't need it yet? But it's
Because that's
somehow
not how evolution works. That's
okay.
not correct
Very good.
understanding.
So then,
if I may, you're asking how we get lungs in fish?
no. What I'm saying is, again, the whole situation, the pressure situation, but instead of a superficial kind of like, oh, fat pigeons, more of like a more complex situation where the pressures happen to make the organism develop a new organ,
Yes.
a completely new organ.
Yes.
And there's so many building blocks to making that organ function.
Let me answer that
Yeah.
real quick.
Yeah.
Every
Cool.
intermediate stage
Mm.
is functional. There's never a point where you're developing an organ
Okay.
that doesn't serve any current function.
Okay. So then that small, so let's say we've got the fish and we see in the transition now in the next stage, it's got that small underdeveloped lung, but it's a fully functional lung is what you're saying? It's from a metabolic.
It doesn't have to be fully functional as a lung. It can
Okay.
have a function as an
All right.
intermediate.
A function as an
Sure.
intermediate.
Yeah, for example, for buoyancy.
Yeah, can I walk you through this? Because I've actually looked into this a bunch. So, from what we know of the evolution of lungs in fish, and this is supported by fossil evidence, I can find links for you later if you want.
Sure.
So, a lot of fish have a structure called an air bladder. Air bladders are often like offshoots of the stomach that are filled with air.
Yeah.
They help control the fish's buoyancy. But because it's an internal organ that's vascularized, it has blood vessels, it also acts as an emergency air storage for like situations where there's not a lot of oxygen in the air or in the water. So it's an emergency air bladder.
Okay. Yeah.
So if the fish lives in an environment where the water very often loses its oxygen, there's a big selective pressure for it to have a more efficient air bladder and a bigger air bladder that works better and better. And
Okay.
as time goes on, the fish with better air bladders, they survive better. And we see this in gradual stages in stuff like
Mhm.
coelacanths and lungfish or bichir.
And gouramis.
And I don't know about them, but I wouldn't
Yeah,
be surprised.
it's
They're found
really
in a
cool.
lot of fish.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
do you,
yeah.
do you
And
think that? Do
the
you
But my
more
thing
time
is
you
that-
spend on land, the better you are at filling those air bladders and using
Okay.
them to extract oxygen. The better.
Sure.
Do you
But
think
because-
that there's a sufficient amount of oxygen now where it's completely eliminated the need for that lung organ? Like that maybe at one point
or even the opposite, a lack of oxygen in the water where it needs to even further develop that bladder, which is why we would, if that was the case, we'd see gouramis with even larger lungs, or the bladders shifting into lungs, so to speak.
So,
And
to
because
answer
they are
that-
creatures that procreate so
Wait.
quickly, and they have generation, we can have 1,000 generations of gourami in a short period of time. We should be
Sorry,
able to observe
the
it.
question has been
So
asked. Could
isn't
I
water
answer?
always 2 oxygens, 1 hydrogen?
No, I'm not
Or
100%
2 hydrogen?
satisfied with what you said, Doc,
So
because I'm just
there-
wondering also, how does it then, if it starts off as just a small little bladder bag, or whatever, a small underdeveloped non-functional thing, how does it then go on to properly build up
non-functional.
all the building blocks? No, well,
it
non-functional.
is functional.
No, well, not in its initial transition stage. In the
No,
first
it
stage,
is.
the very
It
first
is.
step.
So
No, but
It
what
is
you're saying,
functional.
what Doc said is it's a bladder. It's not a lung yet. A bladder is not necessarily a lung.
it is an air tank that can be
No.
used for
It's
buoyancy
it would.
What you're not
and
No,
understanding
what I
is
mean
that-
is at that stage,
There's
it's
a
not the
misunderstanding here. Let
same.
me just clarify this. When he's saying that it's not functional as a lung, that doesn't mean it's not functional. It still serves a function.
Yeah, it's just not at the end. It's not.
Yes.
Let's say we have 5 steps, right? So the first step, next progeny, then next progeny, so whatever. But then first step, you got the very first functional for what it is, but not functional in compared to the full specifications of the final organ, right? So you have that one stage. So my question is, how would you get to a metabolic, how by the entire everything that you need for that to at the end stage to be functioning? How does a random mutation process or a random building block process lead to that? If it's so
Grayson, you
random.
want to take this one?
Right? Like we were saying, okay? Mutations introduce new information, variation within the population,
Right,
from which
right.
then like whatever is most beneficial is selected for. And you can have changes in functions, like maybe the original function was for buoyancy or for air storage, but you have mutations that can alter that function, that can make it serve a new functional role as a
Sure.
primitive lung or something.
But
Again-
then it has to become a design. It's got to spread in the gene pool, right? So
That is what happens. Yes.
So what is how is it that you have all the components necessary that that are supposed to be random, so to speak, just lining up? They happen to line up, and they also happen in every single stage become the dominant design in the gene pool.
Because they're beneficial. If they're
Well, but that's
beneficial,
right.
then they are positively selected for, and their frequency in the population increases. That is how population genetics works.
Right. But are they immediately and noticeably, immediately and substantially beneficial in comparison to the survival to the rest of the population? And
Yes.
also my follow up to that is, are we sure it's beneficial and not in lieu of another negative trait that would actually
Yes.
hinder its survivability?
Yes.
Are we sure it's not a runt?
Yes.
How are you sure it's not a runt?
Because if it was, it would not be beneficial. Like definitionally.
No,
if
but
something
you don't
increases-
know that yet.
Wait.
Right.
You wouldn't know
Guys,
it
I
looking
just
at
really
the bone.
It would. Let me just
Sorry.
explain this really quick. Let me explain what I meant.
Sorry, Grayson,
Okay.
before you do, real quick pause. I have been online for 6 hours.
Yeah,
We're
all
going
of
to
us,
close
right?
this in about 15 minutes. All right, just giving
You're
everyone a
weak.
heads up. Now, Grayson,
You're
go ahead.
weak.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know I'm weak. I'm sorry. My eyes are
Doc.
burned.
It's
No, Doc.
okay. It is what it is, guys. It is what it is.
Fucking atheist junior just showed
And
up,
it's
and now
2
someone got to leave.
a.m.
Yeah, happens to me all the time.
Organisms' reproductive fitness is the sum total of all of its different contributing genes. So you're saying that how do we know that a positive gene doesn't actually have a negative effect? Because its reproductive fitness would reflect that, and it doesn't.
No, what I'm saying is in the immediate next progeny, how would you know that it does not have a negative effect on the survivability?
I just
And
told
then also, well, though you haven't been able to observe that, is what I'm saying.
Well, you wouldn't
You
do
can't
it in
really
one
observe-
generation. You'd
Well,
observe it over time.
Right, but so when you look at two different creatures, you think this is the next step with the proto organ, and this is its previous main. It's Gen 0, and then you have the next stage after. How do you know you're not just looking at a runt that just so happens to have an underdeveloped version of the organ you're claiming it evolved?
Because that's way too small of a gradation to see change like that.
So you wouldn't be able to see an underdeveloped organ in one creature that you think is the evolved species of
Look,
another
okay,
creature.
You're getting confused here in your line of
No.
questioning. Okay.
Well, yeah, true.
Wait.
True.
You're saying that there can be no underdeveloped because the original creature did not have the organ at all in any way. So the next step is to have like a first step of developing these lungs eventually. But you cannot claim that these are underdeveloped lungs because the original creature did not have lungs in any
No,
way.
I'm not saying they're underdeveloped lungs technically. I'm saying that they are the proto organs before the final lung, right? So it's a consecutive series of proto organ development until you get to the end organ. But my questioning is
they
that
have
how is it?
of function.
Yes, but how?
The development of the eye. Just watch Richard Dawkins' video on how the eye developed and how you start off with a pinhole eye that just lets you see the difference between light and dark, and then it becomes slowly more and more focused until you can see small shapes.
Sure.
These gradations develop over a long period of time. It's not from one generation to the next where you can see these type of changes.
But the first stage that you described, that's not the proto version, but that was an actual eye. It wasn't a socket and then a ball, right? That was an actual rudimentary
Incorrect.
vision
the first
process.
stage is just light sensitive skin.
Okay, light sensitive skin. That's beautiful. I wish I had that skin.
Okay,
if you think
I
of
tried to explain this to you a while ago. Every single stage is functionally beneficial. It doesn't have to be the same function as the end organ. It can be different functions, but every single stage is an improvement in function in some way.
Yes, I understand that, but what I was just asking you is how does it, through this whole random process, lead to the exact necessary components for the final version of that organ?
There's
You
no
act like
final
this
version,
happens
and it's
all the
not
time.
random.
99% of
There's
species
no
would
final
extinct.
version.
Hold on, I'm talking to Grayson. I just want to hear his thoughts.
No, there's
Yeah.
no final version, and it's not.
No.
random, so you
I
can
was talking to
drop that
Grayson, man.
immediately.
Mark,
Well,
in this
everybody's in the
specific example that
conversation.
we're talking about, I think we were talking about lung evolution. So in this context, lungs are the quote unquote final step of that. I think in this context, that's what he's asking about.
Okay, all right, but still, it's not random. It's deterministic. Like it's determined to go for whatever is the most optimal blueprint, if you will, at the time.
Like I think that what he's not
sure,
getting
but
is that
we're kind of talking about natural selective pressures.
I think that what you might not be getting is that mutations might be like random or whatever.
Yeah.
But the actual like selection effects, population genetics is not random.
Yeah, I think that goes into like the whole thing where, we needed to put out the terms earlier because from my perspective, I think that the randomness, the nature of the randomness seems to be the main crux of the argument, so to speak. Whereas, things we've already discussed natural selection and those the other pressures, and we seem to come to an agreement on that. That's why I'm trying to figure out where it is that we.
Random.
So okay, so it's not random. These are already pre-existing codes that come into play.
No,
No,
dude,
no.
you keep conflating
No.
mutation and selection. Okay.
Can I give
They're
an analogy?
No. How am I
Can I give an
conflating
analogy that
selection?
might
If
Here, okay,
I'll give
sorry.
an
something is
analogy that
being
might help.
selected, it already exists, right?
Okay,
You
Yeah.
even said that, right?
Let me give you an
Okay.
analogy that might
Okay,
help.
so I'm
But
just trying to be
hold on.
logical
What,
here.
Is nobody else allowed to have a conversation except for this guy? Seriously?
No, Muddy. I've been tracking you all night. You've been talking a lot, and you're trying to interrupt, and you're very rude.
Okay.
I was talking to Grace, and I'd like to hear what he was saying.
I think that other people
John,
should
to be
allowed
fair,
to
you guys have been
participate in the
going back and
conversation.
forth for a while now.
Sure, if there's anyone
Exactly.
else who was who's
Exactly.
present through the whole convo, yeah.
Sorry, just talking about, not Josh.
Well, let me
Sorry.
give an analogy that might help you with this, right? So if you roll a dice, like you've just got a 6-sided dice, and you just roll it, right? The roll is random. It'll just be completely random what you get, right?
Mhm.
If you actually have a selection to select the highest one, then it's not random anymore. The fact that you keep coming up with sixes, for instance, in the case of a 6-sided dice, that's not random anymore. It's selective. It's deterministic, because you're selecting for the highest number. You will keep getting the sixes.
And the 6 pre-exists on the dice, right?
Yeah. So what?
Okay. Well, that's what I was trying to tell you when you came in storming like a
Dude.
bull in a china shop, and then you didn't realize what we were talking about.
No,
We're saying how
selection
earlier we're
and
saying how
inclusion.
alleles. Yeah, but Grayson, we already talked about how alleles they already exist before they get selected into the new progeny at the
And
point
new
of conception.
alleles can be created from mutations.
They can.
Yes, but you're saying that mutations is not the driving force of evolution.
When
So
did
that's
he say that?
you literally just told me a moment ago
plus
that. You just told me a moment ago. Yeah.
Mutation plus selection.
Okay, because just a moment ago you were correcting me on the randomness portion.
Because you keep
you said.
conflating it, dude. Look, listen.
But you're saying it's one of
listen,
two
please.
aspects that
Please
are
just
important.
listen to this.
Yeah. Okay.
Mutations can be random. Selection is not random.
Okay. So mutations and selection. We don't disagree on selection as a process. We do disagree on selection as the terminology. But then also I try to bring in mutations, and you told me that the mutations weren't so relevant to actually forming parts and functions and new evolutionary versions. So is it the natural selection so if we got you got these two, is it the natural selection that is more of the driving force? Is it like a 25-75 ratio? What would it be?
They work in
Both
tandem.
of them. You need
So
both.
50-50.
Like,
I don't know.
You don't have evolution without mutations. You don't have evolutions without selection. You got it both.
Sure. Okay, you got selection, right? That's fine. You have a process that picks out pre-existing code and places it into the programming of the new organism. That's great.
No,
that's fine.
It doesn't have to be pre-existing.
I think I think I can resurrect this guy's argument. Hold on a second. So there is a pre-existing code of organisms that exist, and when they reproduce, the DNA code is attempting to replicate itself perfectly, but it's never going to do that. There are going to be errors in that pre-existing code, and those errors are mutations.
Yeah, but is it the mutation that's leading to the phenotypical presentation of it, or is it the fact that it was an infrequent allele that was selected, and that allele is causing the
no? Take nylonase, for instance. Nylonase.
No,
right?
we
It's
already
basically
spoke.
a bacteria.
We already spoke about nylonase.
It's a bacteria. It's a bacteria that developed the ability to.
It didn't develop the ability. It already had the ability. We already discussed that earlier. It had the ability. It strengthened the capacity of its ability.
How do you know it had that ability? How do you know that?
Because the other guys here on the channel, on the chat, confirmed it too as we were talking earlier. I think you missed that part.
No, we said that's not how it worked.
Well, yeah, because even Grayson, we were talking about, and yeah.
I think you might have gotten an incorrect impression from what we talked about earlier. We did already discuss nylonase in this stream, okay? The idea.
Well, how did a bacteria before nylon was discovered have the ability to digest nylon or nylon waste?
That's a great question. It's a very, very good question, and it's interesting. How did it?
Do you have
the
an
answer?
answer?
It didn't. It didn't.
It didn't.
No, but it did. But you guys already. Yeah, per the conversation that happened a while ago, we just agreed how nylon is. It already had it, but it wasn't very good at digesting it. And then when they put it in a laboratory situation, they were able to develop its capacity.
You're totally misremembering our previous conversation.
Am I? Because I asked you a couple of times if it was existing already, and you
remember
agreed.
when I told you that it wasn't a lab? We explicitly said that it.
All right. Well, that wasn't the most important part of the takeaway.
You're misremembering all the little details.
No, I'm not. No,
yes,
I'm not.
You keep saying Grayson said this, and it's like the exact opposite of what Grayson said.
Well, no, that was right before you guys.
What I actually said, and you're disagreeing with me about what I said.
Yeah.
Okay,
this
please.
Is like Sea Science 2.0.
Yeah. It's just I find it very puzzling when there's conflicts of the same part. But if you want to tell me again, you're saying that the nylonase did not have at all any capacity at all, even the slightest capacity to digest this nylon?
Correct.
Not before it was invented.
It doesn't necessarily follow that before something is invented that there can be no enzymes that are capable of breaking chemical bonds in nylon. It doesn't necessarily follow that that's the case. Okay. But in reality, there aren't any naturally occurring E. coli that are the wild type that are not the nylonase variety that are able to break down nylon. Like, they might have had some enzymes that may have had some activity that could potentially cleave in a very inefficient way nylon bonds, but they're not able to digest it. It's not efficient enough for it to contribute to that function. It requires a mutation that increases, that changes the actual structure of that enzyme to increase its efficiency to the point where it's useful. It requires those mutations.
Okay, so it could have broken it down in a rudimentary form, but then the environmental stimuli ended up causing a pressure where it selected for the ability to actually end up digesting it. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
It didn't break it down in a rudimentary form. That's what I'm telling you.
Because I heard the word breakdown, but I thought you were trying to use that as the difference between digestion. Because I can understand, breakdown versus digestion, right? Because it doesn't have to actually eat it and absorb it and use it for energy. It could just be something, it just could cleave away and not actually do anything with the parts, right?
If it can break one nylon bond,
speaking of breakdowns, I'm about to have one. Okay, I'm sorry. This has been a fun conversation.
Drink some chamomile. Drink some chamomile and chill out.
Talk in the offline, but you can end the stream if you want. Talk.
Sorry, what was that, AJ?
I was saying we can continue the conversation in the offline, but you can end the stream if you want. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, we can do that in a bit.
I thought that's what you were saying.
Just before then, I will ask to everyone on the panel, anyone have any last thoughts on, let's say, tonight's debate? The reason we're having the after show, the topic of the geologic column. We can go from
that one.
Yeah.
Question, real quick. Which one of you was saying they have a degree in in this whole thing and was flaunting their credentials? I just had a quick question. I'm wondering.
Flaunting their credentials.
Really? So I do have a degree in paleontology.
Okay, perfect. So you're very familiar with absolute dating, right? Because I wanted to ask you before. I remember when you brought up with Kent, like the uranium dating and all that. My question is, what do you think is the gold standard out of all the different types of radiometric dating?
There is none.
The best method for radiometric dating?
Yeah, or typical gold standard.
Overlapping them, to be honest with you.
It depends on what you're trying to measure, but I will agree with Mark there. If you can do multiple methods and independent verification, do it. It depends on the situation.
So what do you think about rubidium strontium dating?
It's epic.
I'm not super familiar with it,
Okay.
but I know it is used.
Who said it's epic?
I did. That was
It was a joke, dude. It's a joke.
I'd like to know, because I'd like to know more about that. I've been told from certain people that it is from a certain geologist that it is the gold standard, so to speak, of what they use for dating things. And I'd like to know if that is actually and that was from a different
that you're looking for.
One is not really better than the other.
Okay, so let's say
like different techniques
all right.
have different time frames associated with them due to the half-life of the isotopes.
Sure, yeah. That's because we can't use carbon dating after a certain period of time. Absolutely. So that's why I'm trying to ask. Is this a good testing that we can use to get really old dates?
How
it's
old?
kind of a malformed question because we don't have to use one method. We cross-confirm using multiple methods.
And I think you're kind of going off what Doc wanted to do was to sort of have a chat about what people thought of the debate, because he obviously wanted to move things on. If I'm right,
I'm genuinely curious about
you can
the
be curious all
fallibility.
you want. It's Doc's room, and he's running it how he wants. He said, "Hey, let's give some talks about."
So I'm talking to Doc. I'm asking him what he thinks about the accuracy of these methods.
Hijack the room, Doc.
Guys,
please. What should we do?
Guys, please.
Yeah, Doc. So what do you think about the
appreciated? Just talk about this. Dating methods are an interesting conversation.
Yeah,
but my brain is seriously chugging
All
right
right.
now. So if y'all could have that conversation after the stream ends, I would appreciate it.
Hey, no worries. I could talk to you about it another time because I like dating too.
Sure, my email is in my email is on my channel.
Nice.
Justin, or Tazin, do you have any thoughts on the debate?
I didn't even see the debate, so.
Well, dang. Okay. Grayson, any thoughts? Anything I could have done better, or how awful I was? Anything.
I also didn't see the debate yet, but I do plan on going back and watching it.
I did watch the debate.
Yeah, I could have used less of the whole, you guys are stupid thing. I don't like that. I think it's got to be about the actual science, the logic, not, oh, you guys are stupid because you don't believe this. Oh, you guys are stupid because you don't believe that. You know what I mean? I don't like that.
How about this? How about sometime we set up a stream where we can go like step by step through like some process, like radiometric dating or whatever, like step by step, and see if there's a point where the chain of logic fails. Does that sound fun?
No, because even Ken, like, he has a tendency to do that, and I'm not really about that. I think it's we should all spend more time talking about the concepts rather than talking about who we are as people for believing in the concepts. You know what I mean?
Sure. All right, then next I think AJ, any thoughts on everything?
Yes. So I enjoyed the debate. I thought you did a good job, especially getting into. And did I not say that Kent? Right. I thought it was funny when right off the bat he goes for the where did the top layer come from question. I was like, I called that shit. Not that it's hard to call that, but it was just
I
funny.
literally
That was the first thing he
explained it
said.
several times in my opening.
I know. And what I thought was interesting is that the chat was they kept saying that you were being condescending to Kent, and I just thought that was funny that these Kent Hovind fans are complaining about somebody else, and they're accusing somebody else of being condescending to Kent, who's like the most condescending person when he does these debates and his Whack and Atheist videos. Do you think is that something that you were consciously trying to do, or do you think that because we were talking about tone in the offline in our debate prep, we were talking about tone.
So kind of yes, kind of no. I was taking notes all throughout his opening. I have like 2 or 3 pages here, and like the biggest thing was like he asked questions that I blatantly answered, and
Yeah.
And I played
Yeah,
up
I
that
was
he
gonna
prepped
mention
for
that.
this. I know he didn't prep for it. It was just a normal script. But yeah,
It
he
left me
asked
wanting
questions
more.
I already answered and acted incredulous as to my answers. So I felt a little condescension was a little warranted because he just ignored everything I said.
I thought it
And
was
he
funny.
did it multiple times afterwards.
Yeah, I think it is warranted. And you know, it was just like a lot of what we talked about doing our preparation before was just, he's very predictable, like everybody knows that. But Donnie also didn't ask my question during the debate. I was like, what the fuck, Donnie?
Did you pay for it?
No.
But
Yeah.
what was your question?
I was going to ask Kent, you think that the layers formed in 1 year, meaning that they're like, according to you, they'd be like 4,400 years old. But since you think all the molecules are the same age, shouldn't they be 6,000? Or how do you know that they formed in a year, basically? But Donnie didn't ask.
That's fair. So during the open mic portion, like I tried to call Donnie and T-Rock out for being inconsistent with their logic. Was I on the mark there, or was I hallucinating?
No, I think I was in agreement with you. What I thought was really funny was when you called Ken out for trying to do an infomercial during the debate and sell his DVDs. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, you're trying to save my soul. You don't.
Yeah.
Why are you trying to sell your DVD?
And when you said that his thing about you being in hell is a threat, I'm glad that you called him out on that, because that really annoys me when Ken says that shit. Well, I'll watch the videotape when I'm in heaven. I'll try to get you a copy wherever you are, burning in hell.
Well, I hope you look stylish in heaven. Because man, I tell you, I love the jacket.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. And just like, Kent, isn't this stream about saving my soul? Why are you wishing I'm in hell? Like, isn't that the worst thing that could happen to me?
Well, Christianity is based on a threat. It's accept Jesus or else. So. But the Christians will say that that God doesn't send anybody to hell. You choose to go to hell based on your sinner and lifestyle. Whatever.
Can I threaten you guys and tell you better have a good night?
How dare you? How dare you?
You can't make me.
No, you will enjoy your night and wake up in the morning refreshed, or else.
Challenge accepted.
All right. Well, I got to get out. Thank you very much, Doc. I thank you, everybody here. I appreciate everything and all your time and all the lovely discussions and information. So thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. And for real, feel free to reach out. We can talk more.
I do want to. I definitely do want to. All right. Enjoy your night, guys. Take care.
Next person then, Eric. Did you catch the debate, or are you just here for the after show shit show?
I didn't. I was throwing some popcorn from the live stream late in this stream here, and then I was like, I might as well join. But I didn't really get many words in because the conversation was in full swing. I didn't want to get involved and step over it. I don't know. I kind of want to. This might be a can of worms. I don't know if I want to open this up or not. But I've been asking in live stream kind of a higher level question here, and it comes to the motivations of why there's so much resistance to the science and the evidence and the arguments around the theory of evolution. And I'm curious about the motivations behind that, because I would say 9 times out of 10, maybe more than that, the motivation behind evolution is wrong is because my God exists, my religion is true, what my holy book says is true. And my question is, first of all, why are those two things incompatible? And secondly, if hypothetically you could completely demolish evolution right now, completely blow it out of the water, no questions asked, evolution is false, how does that bolster your idea of a creator God?
I can answer this one. Pick me.
Yeah.
Well, before that, I just want to say, I'm glad I made this slide, because just to talk about that a bit, Eric.
Nice.
There are plenty of Christians who follow the science. It's not an either or.
Yeah.
You can do both.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, AJ.
Do you have
Okay.
the IIJ mission statement?
I guess maybe a good question would be to ask is, okay, a good question would be to ask is, can your God exist and have used evolution as the means to diversify life on the planet? Is that possible?
No, that would be an R-word God. I'll
Yeah.
answer your first question though.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
can I
and
share
I-
something just as a comparison for
Oh.
Doc Dino, what Doc Dino's
Ma-
got on the screen?
Maybe a AJ first and then you, if that's okay, Mark.
Sure. Sorry.
Yeah, so you don't have to. There are Christians who are Bible literalists, but I don't think you have to be a Bible literalist for this incompatibility to happen. But I was talking to my friend Taco on Discord yesterday about this, and he was in disbelief because I was saying that a majority of the people in the United States think that Noah's Ark was a real event that happened because there's a majority who are Christians, over 200 million, and they haven't been challenged on it because they don't have these type of conversations and debates every day like we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when you fundamentally believe that Adam and Eve were real, that directly conflicts with the idea that we slowly evolved from non-human apes, and had, Australopithecine and to Homo erectus, Homo ergaster, all of these common ancestors. That totally conflicts with Adam and Eve. So right there, and it's like why people were so offended by Haeckel's embryos, because when you show the 18th century aristocrats that they're, as an embryo, they're the same as a dog embryo, it makes people, because they like to think we're humans, we're above animals, we're different, we're better than animals because we're created by God, and evolution fundamentally undercuts that. I think it makes people very uncomfortable. So that'd be my answer.
And then I guess my retort to that, I mean, AJ, as the hypothetical Christian, give me the response. My response to that would be, okay, well, is it possible maybe that the Adam and Eve story in the Bible is just kind of mythical, kind of figurative? We can grant you just about everything else in the Bible is true. But hey, maybe just the Adam and Eve story. It's so old. It's like 3,500 years old. We don't really know the author. Maybe that's just figurative, mythical, and the God exists, and most of the other stuff in the Bible is true, but the Adam and Eve story isn't. Isn't that possible? And it's like we could
related to that. Here's a Gallup poll showing like people's views on human origins.
Yeah.
But it's also the flood. The flood is a big one because it's so fundamental to their religion. It's like, if you think that was an actual event, I mean,
it really comes down to my ultimate point with the whole thing is, I mean, like I think in my initial spiel, I said that yes, why are evolution and creator God mutually exclusive? And yeah, if you say, yeah, well, I'm a Christian and I'm a Bible literalist, and it conflicts with the account in Genesis, then yeah, they're incompatible. But then it boils down to the questions of, how do you know Genesis is true? Why does Genesis fly in the face of all the scientific evidence we have? Can it be possible that Genesis isn't true, but the rest of the Bible is true, or most of the rest of the Bible is true? And it just really comes down to how a literal interpretation of a book full of an omnibus full of random books written by random people, most of which we can't identify, most of which that we do not have original manuscripts, even the New Testament and the Gospels. We don't have the original manuscripts for any of those. Why do we trust this or why do Christians trust this as a perfectly accurate, indisputable text? Just simply saying the Bible says so does not help the case at all. It is just a claim.
I'd really like to answer this after Mark.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
Really,
Mark, and then Grayson.
Am I giving my opinion of the debate as well? Because I did take some notes and stuff.
You can do both. Up to you.
Okay, just so quickly. Yeah, I kind of agree with everybody on like the condescending thing. It was probably warranted. What I noticed though, people were getting uppity at when you were asking questions like, "Do you know what this is?" kind of thing. And I know that you were just trying to get an idea of where Kent's knowledge failed. Basically, I know that's what you were doing, but they were taking it as condescending, like trying to catch him out in a thing. It may just be something you want to watch instead of saying, "Do you know what this is?" Just saying, "Hey, this is what that is." So you seem to be using it incorrectly or something like that instead of asking, because they I think that was a trigger for them. But I loved how you also pointed out when you'd answered something before and said, "Hey, I answered that here," and you're misrepresenting it again. Like, I've already corrected you on this. I think that's really powerful to show that Kent, he doesn't care about the real answer. He cares about giving his version, his misrepresentation, his straw man of what it is that he's trying to do. But I thought he did fantastic from what I saw. I didn't see your introduction. I'm going to go back and watch it. But I saw nearly everything else, and you were fantastic. So I was really impressed. You were really calm, collected, all the things that I love to see out of a debate person. And, you know, just pulling up Kent wherever you could on, hey, you've got that wrong. I've already answered it. Here's what I said. You've misrepresented. I think fantastic. Okay, well, I'll put that away. So this is the mission statement for Answers in Genesis. Now, Eric, I really want you to pay attention about what it says. It exists to proclaim the authority of the Bible, and we have to look at that, because when you're sort of saying, hey, the universe is dependent on this God, you're claiming an authority. So they want to be able to say, hey, it is not science giving us the answers. It's not science that is solving our modern problems. It's not this institution that we've built up that's actually doing all of this. We've got to pay attention to God. I think personally it's about power. It's about having power and authority in our modern society. And they see science as having all the power, which it really doesn't. All science does is advise. And I want to, for comparison, but yeah, this is the problem, because they start with the conclusion. They start with the Bible is the authority and everything in it is literally true. And then they work backwards about how to get things into it. And here's their core values: serve, equip, relate, value, engage. Like very, very Christian core values, like service to God. And, you know, we equip the believers to defend their faith. We relate to the gospel and the word. All of it is around faith, basically, and religion, preserving the religion. Now, I just want to quickly, and this is the last thing I'll sort of say, but just as a comparison, this is the National Academy. So National Academy of Science, Engineering, Medicine, etc. So they provide independent, objective advice to inform policy with evidence, spark process and innovation, confront challenging issues for the benefit of society. Notice how different it is. It's not saying, hey, we have the authority of this principle and we're going to, you know, equip people to argue it. So it's our mission and sort of independent, trustworthy advice to facilitate solutions. Like, it's not, and their core value, things like independence, objectivity, rigor, integrity, inclusivity, and truth. Like, have you ever seen a creationist website that says one of our core tenets is truth and objectivity and independence?
Yeah.
Never. And this is why they get to it's the entire process of starting with the conclusion and finding how you can fit the evidence to your conclusion that's the problem.
Yeah.
Because if that's what you're doing, you always find a way to do that.
That's why so much biblical scholarship is really dubious, because a lot of these biblical scholarly institutions, they have, like, you know, commitments of faith, and literally they'll lose their job if they go against the message. So it's objectivity and truth isn't really objectivity and truth is really hard to find in those realms.
I was going to answer it from a slightly different angle, not so much from the institutions of creationism, which I think like have agendas like Mark is outlining, but from the actual creationists, like the average Joe creationists, why they get stuck in this opinion. Well, because I mean, I've literally heard a flat earther say, if the earth is a globe, then there is no God. Like, literally as an if-then statement. Like, they get so entrenched in this rigid thinking where they say, well, if the Bible's not literally 100% true, then it none of it is true.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
very
they say,
black and white, binary position on it.
And that's a direct quote. If the earth is a globe, there is no God. That is a direct quote from a flat earther. And like, they think that the Bible says the earth is flat, and therefore, if the Bible's wrong about one thing, it's wrong about everything. And they get into this very rigid, dogmatic thinking where they think, you know, if the Bible is wrong about any of its claims about Adam and Eve or the flood or any of this, then the entire thing has to be thrown out. And it's like they cannot imagine that there's a middle ground and that the majority of Christians do not have that kind of rigid belief, because in my opinion, this is a sunk cost fallacy.
Oh yeah.
Like they've invested so much of their time, energy, their sense of identity of who they are, so much of themselves as people have been invested into these ideas of their religion, their faith. So much of themselves, their concept of who they are is wrapped up in this, that it's just a sunk cost fallacy. Like there's an irrational escalation in their commitment to this idea that they can't allow themselves to even think otherwise. They can't put themselves in the shoes of saying like, well, maybe I could treat this as spiritually true or an allegory for some spiritual truth, and it doesn't have to be literally true. They just escalate their commitment to this rigid dogmatic. This has to be all true or none of it is.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, like that you was perfectly described. Like my older brother, I have an older brother who's about 55 years old, completely committed his life to the Jehovah's Witnesses. And yeah, the sunk cost fallacy, the cost of looking back and saying, you know what, I think I was wrong. I think I wasted 55 years of my life, all those opportunities, a potential career, a family, on a lie. And that's a really difficult thing to face. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems for a lot of like, apologist Christian YouTubers, because they like, take like, I don't know, someone like Mike Winger, for example. I'll bet money he will never deconvert. Like 0%, almost 0% chance he'll ever deconvert, because there's just way too much writing on it. If he were to dismantle his ministry, that's his income gone. That's a lot of egg on his face for, constantly, for so many years saying the wrong things. And I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers, is that's in the way. And that on the flip side, though, that's why I give so much respect to individuals like Tyler Veda. I think that was his name. Had an online ministry, had a YouTube channel, and then one day said, you know what? I've evaluated this and I realized that, hey, the barriers broke down. I no longer believe the Bible to be inerrant. I no longer believe the Bible to be 100% true. I started looking at the Bible as a collection of books, and each book as a collection of verses. And just because a book has one author's title on it doesn't mean that necessarily one author worked on it. And I started looking at.
Is he still a theist?
I think he's still a theist, but I don't think he's a Christian anymore. He's still he's a theist, but I don't think he's a Christian. I think he's a deist.
Just non-denominational.
Yeah. He's definitely not a Christian anymore. I think he denies the whole story of Christ and stuff like that. I respect that.
Pardon me, just really quick. I'm sorry. This isn't anything against you, Eric. I am actually falling asleep. I'm sorry.
You don't have 5-hour energy drinks here in a fridge next to you or anything? No.
It's not you.
I've been here for
it's okay.
9 hours.
I understand. You had a hard day. I understand. I'll shut up now. It was a fun conversation. Thanks for letting me.
You're fine.
Thanks for letting me get in my few sentences. So yeah, thanks.
Bree, do you have any thoughts on anything?
I actually watched the debate. I thought you did pretty well.
I have a viewer.
You don't get anything new from Kent, but at least you get a chance to explain stuff to one of these, like the brachiopod thing. He went right back to calling them cleums right after you told him that. That was hilarious. Like within probably 2 minutes of you telling him that those are not cleums, they're brachiopods, he went right back to calling them brachiopods. Of course, that's par for course for Dr. Dino.
Which one?
I didn't. Well, we got 2 Doc Dinos, right? And then you got Dr. Archaeopteryx in there in the after chat too. So it was a diverse crowd of Archosaurs. Anyway, I didn't even I wasn't even expecting to come in on the stream while you were still live. I just wanted to come in after it was over and tell you that thank you for pinning him down and forcing him to go into that about the brachiopod thing, because that's so annoying to me.
No problem. I knew there was a group of mollusks that close tight when they die. Like it requires energy for them to open. I just couldn't figure out what the group was, and then Wikipedia saved me.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. Yeah.
But at any rate, Thank you, everyone, for joining. People in the audience, people who were here earlier, people who are here now. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed the debate, the open mic, and the after show. One last thing I do want to say, something I kind of stressed at the end of the actual open mic / debate. You can be Christian and accept science.
Sure.
It's not either or.
Francis
Most of
Collins.
my family are very devout Christians. They're the most wonderful people I've ever known. And they've also taught me a ton about the scientific world.
Dr. Cy Gart's an awesome guy. Awesome guy.
Yeah. Yeah. You can be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, anything. And you'll be accepted in the scientific community as long as you're honest and you do good science. So you don't have to follow a tax evader hiding out in a gravel pit in Alabama. Look into the evidence. Who knows? You might even find that there's even more to your God to love. Thanks for joining, everyone.